Chapter 467, Monster. Chapter 467, Monster. Although she was behind a formation in the stone chamber, Yao Xue could still sense the repressive pressure that was arriving. It was as though a supreme monster was rapidly approaching. Junhao's expression was dark and his gaze was cold. I can't deal with something that Su Zimo left behind? Yao Xue, do you really think that he's the only one with an ace up his sleeve? Following Junhao's fallout, both parties were on the brink of fighting. The two great Zhou guards looked serious and withdrew their spirit weapons one after another, ready to fight. Si Yutong's eyes were filled with shock. He retreated slowly upon realizing that something was amiss with the situation, wanting to stay out of things and find a chance to escape. On the one hand, it was the third princess of the great Zhou dynasty. He did not dare to offend her. On the other hand, although it seemed like the other party was a cultivator of Azure Frost sect, his background did not seem simple. More importantly, Junhao was at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment. Si Yutong did not dare offend him. How unlucky! He cursed internally. Junhao's gaze shifted towards Si Yutong as he asked murderously with a cold glint in his eyes, Si Yutong, whose side are you on? He was straightforward, leaving Si Yutong with nowhere out at all. If Si Yutong chose to be on Junhao's side, once this matter was exposed, he would definitely be hunted down in the territory of the great Zhou dynasty and would be in dire straits. However, if he chose to be on Ji Yaoshue's side, he would be faced with a fierce battle right away. Although they had the advantage in numbers, they were all at 6 Meridian Foundation establishment. They had little chance of winning against Junhao, who was at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment. Right then, a cultivator walked over from the tunnel. His feet did not touch the ground and he was like a ghost. Si Yutong was scared out of his wits. Wearing white robes, that person's face was frightfully pale and his skin was pale. Reeking of death, those listless eyes that resembled dead fishes bulged out in a bloodshot manner, looking extremely terrifying. Bang, bang, bang. Heavy footsteps approached. A tall and mighty figure followed right after and arrived. A full 10 feet tall, he was silent and wore black robes with a hood that covered his body tightly. This was like a guardian of hell. The expressions of the two great Zhou guards changed slightly as they subconsciously gulped, trying hard to compose themselves. Against the black-robed cultivator, the two of them seemed like children. Both of them turned their attention over. Most of the black-robed cultivator's face was covered by the hood, revealing only his chin such that it was hard to catch his appearance. Initially, Si Yutong was still hesitant. However, he made up his mind after the black-robed cultivator appeared and suddenly said, "Senior brother Jun, I'm definitely on your side." Junhao's eyes flickered with a mocking expression as he nodded. "Very good. At least you can read the situation." Si Yutong heaved a sigh of relief. The reason for his decision was because he could sense danger exuding from the black-robed cultivator. By standing on Junhao's side, he was exposing himself to the danger of being hunted by the great Zhou dynasty. However, he would have to die right away if he chose to stand on Ji Yaoshue's side. Junhao had already composed himself. Arriving before the white-robed cultivator, he bowed deeply and respectfully. "Thank you for rushing over, Senior Brotherly. I'm afraid I'll have to depend on you to dispel this formation." "Yes." The white-robed cultivator raised his head slightly. Si Yutong's gaze shimmered, and he frowned to himself. He noticed something odd. Junhao merely greeted the white-robed cultivator and was oblivious to the tall black-robed cultivator at the back. However, Si Yutong could clearly feel that the black-robed cultivator was scarier. How could that be? Turning around, Junhao could not conceal the killing intent in his eyes as he glared at the two great Zhou guards and said coldly, "Si Yutong, it's time for you to shine." All right. With no other way out, Si Yutong could only abide by Junhao. "Go!" Slapping his storage bag, Si Yutong hollered softly and summoned a supreme-grade flying sword. A resplendent glow filled the sword in a bedazzling manner. The two great Zhou guards retaliated as well, churning their spirit energies with all their might. 6 spirit meridians appeared as they summoned their flying swords to fight against Tianhuang. Cling, clang. The 3 of their flying swords collided repeatedly in midair, causing sparks to fly. The guards who were qualified to enter the ancient battlefield were carefully selected from the capital of Great Zhou. Since the 3 of them were at 6 Meridian Foundation establishment, Tianhuang did not have any advantage against the 2 guards, and was instead losing slowly. Humph! Waving his robes, Junhao sent forth a green azure chi that condensed into a gigantic palm in midair. The temperature on the battlefield dipped instantly. The 2 great Zhou guards were shocked. Both of them could not deal with the full might of a spirit art released by a 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator, Azure Frost Palm. Right then, a cold laugh sounded from within the stone chamber. The stone door opened and Ji Yaoshue strode out. Waving her robes in the same manner, she conjured hand seals and let out an azure frost chi, creating a massive palm. The 2 palms collided in midair. Boom! Spirit chi dissipated evenly. 7 Meridian Foundation establishment. Junhao's eyes lit up, and he could not help but clap his hands in laughter. Well, to think that you've also unlocked your 7th Spirit Meridian, Yaoshue. It's no wonder why you're my junior sister. Ji Yaoshue was wearing the long pale yellow dress. Although she was merely standing there, she exuded an air of nobility that was filled with dominance. Princess, hurry back. It's dangerous here. One of the great Zhou guards urged after seeing Ji Yaoshue leave the stone chamber. Yaoshue, you're finally willing to come out? Junhao whipped out a flying sword from his storage bag and shook his head. However, since you walked out of that stone chamber, you don't have to return anymore. Go! The sword tore through the air, turning into a streak of light that arrived instantly. Ji Yaoshue did not panic at all as she circulated the spirit sea in her dantian with her full might. Her 7 Meridian spirit energy surged wildly as she similarly brought out a flying sword and fought against Junhao. Since they were both at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment and had cultivated an Azure Frost sect before, they were rather familiar with one another's moves. In a short period of time, neither could overpower the other. On the other hand, although the 2 great Zhou guards had the advantage against Tianhuang, they could not kill the latter right away either. The fight between the 5 of them carried on in that stalemate. Spirit chi surged furiously on the battlefield and sword chi was merciless, but no victor could be decided. Junhao became increasingly frustrated. Distracted momentarily, his arm was cut by Ji Yaoshue's flying sword and blood flowed out. A bunch of trash. The white-robed cultivator that was initially standing at the side was finally getting impatient. Waving his hand gently, he said in a cold manner, "Go and kill those 2 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators and capture that woman alive." The black-robed cultivator that was originally standing motionlessly behind him walked forward. Bang, bang, bang. With each step taken, the cave abode would quake violently in a terrifying manner. Roar! Charging in the direction of the battlefield, the black-robed cultivator suddenly let out a deafening roar. Shing! His black robes were ripped apart, turning into countless pieces of cloth that danced in the air. The black-robed cultivator revealed his true appearance. Apart from the white-robed cultivator, everyone else present was shocked and their pupils constricted. Their scalps prickled as they felt their hairs stand on ends. What's that monster? One of the great Zhou guards asked with a trembling voice. His limbs had gone cold. Even though Junhao knew what the black-robed cultivator was right from the start, he was still shocked when he caught sight of his true appearance and nearly lost control of his flying sword. Chapter 468. Wow! So amazing? Chapter 468. Wow! So amazing. That was no cultivator. To be precise, that wasn't a living being. The monster reeked of a rotting stench and his skin was black. Muscles bulged from his body in distinct pieces, looking as though they were washed with steel liquid. Long fingernails as sharp as knives shone with a ghastly green color. They were clearly carrying poison. There were no pupils in his eyes, and they were completely white, looking extremely frightening. When the monster roared, green veins popped up on its neck and face, akin to small little snakes that were crawling on the surface of its skin. It bared a pair of bloodied fangs, and its face was shuddering and menacing. This was a living corpse. None of them present had witnessed such methods before. Not only was the corpse resurrected, it was controlled by someone and let out such a terrifying aura. Even though she was the princess of Great Zhou, Ji Yaoxue was also greatly shocked, and her face was pale. Bang! 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 The corpse strode in huge steps towards the battlefield. Sensing that the situation was bad, Junhao and Si Yutong had already withdrawn themselves from the battle long ago, afraid that they would be implicated. Go! One of the great Zhou guards summoned his flying sword while the other conjured hand seals, producing blazing fireballs that shot at the corpse. As though it did not see them, the corpse did not slow down at all. The two great Zhou guards were slightly relieved when they saw that, thinking to themselves, at the end of the day, it's just a walking corpse with no brains that doesn't know how to dodge at all. Clang! Before they could finish their thoughts, the flying sword had already pierced the corpse's chest. However, the sound of metal clashing echoed. The flying sword was repelled. The fireball landed on the corpse and lasted for 2 breaths before extinguishing. In the billowing smoke, not only was the corpse fine, it turned even more violent. The two of them were dumbfounded and their eyes widened. At the same time, Ji Yaoshue's flying sword descended. Shining with 4 bedazzling spirit patterns, its sword chi was cold, and it pierced the corpse's head with its sharpness. Clang! Another crisp sound rang out, accompanied by a chain of sparks. The flying sword was repelled as well. A faint white scar merely appeared on the corpse's glabella. Its skin was not even scratched. Ji Yaoxue was gravely shocked. She was at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment, and she possessed a supreme-grade flying sword. Yet, she could not even scratch the skin of the corpse with her full power. How was she going to fight this corpse that weapons could not pierce and fire and water could not damage? Before she could finish her thoughts, the corpse arrived in front of the 2 great Zhou guards within a few strides. Reaching out, it crushed both of their heads instantly. The 2 guards did not get a second chance to attack at all. Swash! Ji Yaoxue summoned her flying sword once more, and this time round, they were aimed for the corpse's eyes. She believed that everything had their weaknesses no matter how strong they were. Suddenly, the corpse glared at the incoming sword and reached out. He grabbed it and placed it in front of his mouth before spitting a ball of oily green smoke at it. The moment the smoke touched the blade, the spirit light of the supreme-grade flying sword dimmed. Ji Yaoshue's expression changed as she lost her connection to the supreme-grade flying sword. Not good, she thought to herself. Turning around to retreat back to the stone chamber, a black shadow had already arrived before her. Swoosh! An evil gust of wind burst forth, suffocating her. Ji Yaoxue merely felt her chest turn stuffy and her head spin. The corpse was filled with poison from head to toe and gave off a rotting stench. Any cultivator that breathed in that rotting stench without any precautions would definitely be affected. The corpse reached out with its massive hands, aiming at Ji Yaoshue's shoulders to capture her alive. All of a sudden, the pale yellow dress that she was wearing shone with 4 bright spirit patterns. With the obstruction, the corpse failed to grab Ji Yaoshue's shoulder right away. She jolted to her senses and hurriedly retreated a couple of steps back, entering the stone chamber in a flash before shutting its stone doors. Roar! The corpse was enraged and roared, slamming violently at the stone doors. Boom! While the stone doors shook violently, they did not open. Buzz! At the same time, as though it sensed something, a series of formation lights appeared on the ground of the entrance of the stone chamber. Another formation was activated at the entrance of the stone chamber, engulfing the corpse within. Sword chi buzzed incessantly. Sharp sword chi shot forth from within the formation and stabbed the corpse repeatedly from all directions in a resplendent dazzle. Trapped in the formation, The corpse flung its arms and collided against the sword Qi from all around, roaring in endless rage. Not long after, the skin of the black corpse was already torn against the relentless attacks of the sword Qi, and it was injured all over, leaking with gooey, sticky blood that was extremely pungent. What a terrifying killing formation! Junhao felt a sense of fear and broke out in cold sweat upon seeing that. That was clearly a trump card left behind by Su Zimo. Apart from the defense formation, there was a killing formation around the stone chamber. Previously, if Junhao had attacked forcibly, he would have been caught in the killing formation and would most likely have died after being pierced by the countless swords. Su Zimo, you're savage. Junhao grit her teeth and endless hatred flooded his eyes. Although the white-robed cultivator felt a little pained looking at the corpse's skin getting damaged by the sword Qi, he did not appear to be worried. While the might of the killing formation was terrifying and might even be able to kill an 8 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator, it did not manage to hurt the corpse fundamentally, and those were merely superficial wounds. As the filthy blood of the corpse flowed onto the ground, the formation patterns were gradually tainted. The might of the killing formation was diminishing. The formation light was also dimming gradually. Before long, the killing formation was dispelled entirely and the corpse broke free. By now, it had descended into a complete frenzy as it charged at the stone chamber. Bang, bang, bang. The light of the defensive formation shone repeatedly, withstanding the attacks of the corpse one after another. With nowhere else to retreat to within the stone chamber, Ji Yaoxue found herself calming down instead. In her heart, she knew that the power produced by the corpse was not weaker than an 8 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. Coupled with its corrosive aura, poison, and blood, the formation would not be able to hold out for much longer. If the formation was dispelled, she would commit suicide right here. A princess of Great Zhou would definitely not allow herself to be humiliated by others. As though it did not know the meaning of fatigue, the corpse fought for an entire day and night without stopping. The light of the formation had dimmed considerably. The defensive formation could be broken through at any moment. The situation was determined and Ji Yaoxue was on the brink of calamity with nowhere to escape. Si Yutong walked to Junhao's side and let out a fawning smile. Sweeping his gaze past the white-robed cultivator, he asked, "Senior brother Jun, what's the name of that fellow Taoist?" "You're not qualified to know." Junhao replied, "All you have to know is that he hails from one of Tianhuang Mainland's supersects and is the strongest paragon of the Foundation establishment realm." Why yes. Si Yutong nodded repeatedly with a fearful expression. Senior brother Li's combat strength is unparalleled, and he's practically invincible amongst all Foundation establishment cultivators. He can suppress all enemies in Tianhuang Mainland, and even if the ancient emperors were at Foundation establishment realm, they might not be a match for senior brother Li. Junhao spilled out songs of praises without any shame or embarrassment. Although he could tell that Junhao was sucking up to him, the white-robed cultivator enjoyed it nevertheless. After a momentary pause, the white-robed cultivator said, "That's not for sure." The human emperor's palace appeared some time back and the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island appeared. That man is not to be underestimated. Junhao hurriedly remarked, "You don't have to be humble, senior brother Li. I still believe nobody in the Foundation establishment realm is your match in a one-on-one battle." "Yes." Nodding, the white-robed cultivator declared with pride, "I don't even have to do it myself if it's a one-on-one battle. This steel corpse that I cultivated is more than enough to kill that monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island." Wow, so amazing. Suddenly, a voice sounded in everyone's ears, carrying a hint of sarcasm and mockery. Chapter 469. Test it with your life. Chapter 469. Test it with your life. Both Junhao and Si Yutong frowned in confusion. Although that voice sounded rather familiar, the two of them were not certain. Rather, that person should have been dead. Could he have ventured into the depths of the ancient battlefield and yet returned alive? Who's there? The white-robed cultivator's slightly bulged eyes shifted, and his expression turned grim with killing intent. Right after, his eyes flashed with confusion as well. That voice did not come from the cave abode. From the sound of it, it seemed like it came from 5 kilometers away. That was the confusing portion. If he was 5 kilometers away, how could he hear their conversation in the cave abode? Was his hearing that powerful? Could omnipresent hearing truly exist in the world? All of a sudden, the sound of clothes fluttering sounded, approaching from afar at an extremely fast speed. It was as though it arrived at the cave abode's entrance in the blink of an eye. What a swift movement technique! The white-robed cultivator's heart skipped a beat as he turned to glare at the tunnel. It was the same for Tianhuang and Tianhuang. Both of them wanted to know if it was that man who had arrived. Before long, a green figure appeared in the tunnel, striding over with steady footsteps. Although he looked calm, there was an indescribable aura around him. The intruder had elegant features, looking like a scholar. It was Su Zimo who had rushed over from Xintian City. Junhao's eyes narrowed with cold killing intent as he declared hatefully, "It's truly you. You're not dead?" Yutong's mouth was slightly agape as he uttered in disbelief. Su Zimo's expression was calm as he swept his gaze past the two of them without pausing. Right after, he looked at the mighty corpse that was ramming against the stone chamber and his eyes flashed. Raising his brow, he seemed to have recalled something. He paused for a brief moment before fixing his gaze on the white-robed cultivator. After entering the cave abode, Su Zimo did not say anything and merely surveyed his surroundings. However, for some unknown reason, that simple action of his caused the white-robed cultivator to feel an unprecedented sense of pressure. Su Zimo's eyes were bright and deep. His gaze was nonchalant, and it seemed like he could control everything with a single look. Even without saying anything, he was exuding a dominance that surpassed everything. It was an aura that could not be faked. This was something that was created through the corpses and blood of countless paragons, and was revealed subconsciously. The white-robed cultivator was expressionless, but he felt uneasy. Suddenly, he retreated a couple of steps back and shouted softly, "Come back!" The corpse came to a sudden halt and paused for a moment before taking huge strides towards the white-robed cultivator. It stood beside the latter and glared at Su Zimo murderously. By now, the wounds inflicted by the killing formation had already formed scabs and were no longer bleeding. "Senior Brotherly, this is Su Zimo," Junhao commented hurriedly. "He's the one who injured your battle corpse." The killing formation outside the stone chamber was also set up by him. The white-robed cultivator did not say anything and merely glared at Su Zimo with a grim expression. Indifferently, Su Zimo said, "One of the 5 heretical doctrines, corpse refinement cult." After entering the depths of the ancient battlefield, he gained a good understanding of the various factions on Tianhuang Mainland thanks to Tang Yu and the others. As such, he recognized the white-robed cultivator's background instantly. Corpse refinement cult cultivators were extremely recognizable as they would always bring along a battle corpse that they refined using their sect's secret skills to fight for them. Looking at the white-robed cultivator, Su Zimo asked with a fake smile, "Since you were bragging about how strong you were earlier on, why didn't you go take on the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island beneath the human emperor's palace?" The white-robed cultivator's expression turned terrible. Naturally, he wanted to fight for the human emperor's inheritance when the human emperor's palace appeared as well. His battle corpse was invincible against weapons and could not be damaged by water or fire. In terms of strength, it was no weaker than 8 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. However, corpse refinement cult cultivators had a fatal weakness. Compared to their mighty battle corpses, they were not strong. If they lost the protection of their battle corpse, they would most definitely die against 8 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. Paragons from all over the place were gathered beneath the human emperor's palace. Needless to think, it would definitely be an unprecedented battle royale. There was no way his battle corpse would be able to protect him entirely in that sort of battle royale, and it would be hard for him to survive. After hesitating for a long time, the white-robed cultivator decided to give up on the human emperor's palace. Later on, it was proven that his decision was the right one as well. It was said that almost half the paragons who fought in that bloodied battle beneath the human emperor's palace were dead, and most of them were crippled. It was extremely tragic. The white-robed cultivator harumphed coldly. It was a battle royale beneath the human emperor's palace. If it was a one-on-one battle, the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island might not be my match. Oh. Su Zimo raised his brow. Who are you? What sector you from? The white-robed cultivator asked instead. Junhao explained hurriedly, Don't worry, Senior Brotherly. This is merely a disciple of a small sect in the Great Zhou dynasty. He has no backing, and he was merely at 4 Meridian Foundation establishment half a year ago. Compared to factions such as super sects and the 5 heretical doctrines, Ethereal Peak could truly only be considered as a small sect. The white-robed cultivator frowned slightly when he heard Junhao's words. If this guy was at 4 Meridian Foundation establishment half a year ago, even if he had heavenly defying cultivation speed and made use of the Meridian unlocking elixir, he would only be at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment at best. In the worst-case scenario, even if he was at 8 Meridian Foundation establishment, so what? This was someone from a small sect without any backing. The foundations of small sects were not strong and they had limited secret skills. How strong could this guy be? Could he have judged wrongly? Gradually, the white-robed cultivator's expression turned cold as he waved his hand. Go. Check out the skills of this fellow Taoist. The corpse acknowledged by roaring with a torrential aura before chairing over in huge strides. Compared to the tall and mighty corpse, Su Zimo could be considered as a thin weakling. It seemed as though he wouldn't even be able to withstand a single push of the corpse's finger. However, Su Zimo's expression was unchanged, and he merely smiled against the incoming corpse. Clang! Unknowingly, a blood-colored saber had already appeared in his hands. The saber trembled with a torrential blood chi. Test my skills? With a razor-sharp gaze, Su Zimo said coolly, Test it with your life. Boom! Before his words were finished, Su Zimo had already made a huge stride. The moment his stride landed, a series of dense cracks appeared on the ground beneath him. In a split second, the entire place shook and the cave abode quaked violently. Dust filled the place continuously, and it seemed like the cave could topple at any moment. Everyone present felt their hearts skip a beat. Su Zimo channeled his spirit energy, and instantly, the spirit sea in his dantian surged and created terrifying waves. One after another, spirit meridians shone brightly beneath his green robes as spirit energy surged rampantly. 8 Meridian Foundation establishment. Junhao and Si Yutong were astonished as they exclaimed. Swoosh! Su Zimo slashed out and a blood beam expanded, landing on the head of the corpse like a blazing blood sun. The corpse could not dodge in time, and could only tilt its head slightly. Blood quencher sliced down along the corpse's shoulder and cut downwards heavily. Its blade let out a jarring sound as it sliced through the muscles and bones, as though it was cutting a metallic object. Gooey, filthy blood gushed out. That slash almost cut the corpse into 2 halves. Blood quencher only slowed down in its tracks after cutting into the corpse's chest. After it was blocked by blood quencher, the corpse could barely advance. Although Su Zimo seemed frail and skinny, a casual slash from him was enough to send forth a shuddering power that even the corpse that was invulnerable against weapons, water, and fire could not withstand. The white-robed cultivator's expression turned paler as his figure swayed for a moment. Chapter 470, Meet Sludge. Chapter 470, Meet Sludge. In Tianhuang Mainland, be it the 9 immortal sects, 7 fiend sects, or 6 Buddhist sects, there were extremely few sects that managed to pass on their legacies and remain standing from the ancient era till now. Among them, countless top factions were drowned in the sands of time, leaving behind nothing but ruins and legends. Corpse Refinement Cult was one of the rare few super sects that managed to survive from the ancient era till now. Legend in the cultivation world even has it that the roots of corpse refinement cult can be traced back to the primordial era, the brutish period of time where the thousands of races reigned and humans were weak and enslaved. There were countless secret skills in corpse refinement cult, and within them, there was even an ancient supreme sutra called the Corpse Classic. The Corpse Classic contained many secret skills. Even the descriptions for the method of cultivating a battle corpse alone were plenty. Battle corpses were also graded by levels: Iron Corpse, Bronze Corpse, Silver Corpse, Golden Corpse. 4 foundation establishment cultivators and golden cores of corpse refinement cult, they could only refine iron corpses. Bronze corpses required corpse refinement cult cultivators to be of nascent soul realm and to cultivate an essence spirit before they could be refined. For each battle corpses, the deeper the color, the more power they possessed and the stronger they were. The power of the white-robed cultivator's battle corpse was enough to fight against 8 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. Furthermore, the battle corpse was not only invulnerable to weapons, water, and fire, it even possessed poison. Even 8 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators won't be able to injure the core of the battle corpse. There was no way the white-robed cultivator would have expected a seemingly delicate cultivator to nearly slice his battle corpse into half with a single casual slash. How terrifying was that strength? A trace of panic flickered through the white-robed cultivator's slightly bulged eyes. Immediately, as though he made some sort of a resolve, the white-robed cultivator conjured hand seals and channeled a secret skill of his sect. Biting his tongue gently, he spat out a mouthful of essence blood that spilled onto the battle corpse's wounds. "Heal!" The white-robed cultivator shouted softly. Instantly, the frightening injury on the battle corpse started healing at a visible speed as greenish-black meat grew and intertwined together. The battle corpse roared with immense ferocity. At the same time, the aura of the white-robed cultivator turned extremely weak and his gaze dimmed. Swaying to one side, he seemed like he could collapse at any moment. He slapped his storage bag and took out an elixir before swallowing it. It was only then that he recovered some vitality. It was clearly a secret skill similar to blood escape. By sacrificing his body's vitality, he repaired the battle corpse's wounds and triggered it to produce even greater combat strength. The battle corpse reached out with its hands and grabbed Blood Quencher's blade. Blood Quencher was drowned by the endless filthy blood as it was stuck in the battle corpse's body. Gradually, the light on its blade dimmed. Harumphing coldly, Su Zimo withdrew his saber with strength. The battle corpse chose to let the blade slice its palms than to relinquish its grip. Furthermore, it even lunged forward with the momentum, spitting out a ball of oily green smoke that was extremely nauseating. "Watch out," Ji Yaoshue warned from within the stone chamber. Earlier on, the corpse's smoke had already destroyed her supreme-grade flying sword. Not only that, the corpse even opened its mouth and bared its bloody fangs, biting towards Su Zimo's neck like a wild beast. Su Zimo frowned and released his blood quencher before retreating. It wasn't because he was afraid of the smoke and those fangs. The corpse was truly way too disgusting that Su Zimo did not wish to touch it with his hands. Su Zimo's retreat revealed an opening in the tunnel momentarily. The eyes of the white-robed cultivator lit up. In truth, he had already thought of retreating the moment Su Zimo attacked with the slash earlier on. While it was meant for the corpse, he knew that he wouldn't be able to survive that attack even if he had 10 lives. When he saw Su Zimo dodge to the side, the white-robed cultivator moved in a flash and sped towards the tunnel since he was unwilling to battle. Su Zimo's eyes flashed with mockery when he saw that. Swiping his storage bag, a huge, squarish golden seal appeared in his palms. The Khanate spirit weapon, Coiling Dragon Seal. It was extremely easy for Su Zimo to kill this corpse refinement cult cultivator. As long as he channeled his bloodline and made use of his spirit wings together with divine steed fleeting, he would be able to wrap around the battle corpse and strike that person to death. However, earlier on, Su Zimo had a thought and recalled this treasure he had just obtained. He was also curious as to how powerful the legendary Khanate spirit weapons were, let alone one that was given to him by the human emperor. Go! Tossing the coiling dragon seal upwards, he pointed, and a stream of spirit energy was injected into it from his finger. The coiling dragon seal expanded rapidly and shone with a golden radiance. Hovering in midair like a blazing sun, it was bedazzling and let out a shuddering aura, exuding endless might. The feral battle corpse suddenly seemed as pathetic as an ant against the coiling dragon seal. The coiling dragon seal descended rapidly. Boom! A loud bang sounded when it rammed against the battle corpse's head. Crack! 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 Right after, the sound of bones cracking could be heard. The coiling dragon seal merely paused for a brief moment before continuing down. With a thud, the battle corpse that was a full 10 feet tall was crushed into a pile of foul-smelling meat sludge by the coiling dragon seal, spreading all over the ground without any body left. The white-robed cultivator was about to rush into the tunnel when a blindingly bright seal crashed down, blocking the exit. He spun around hurriedly, and a pile of meat sludge splattered onto his pale face. The white-robed cultivator's eyes were widened and his mind went blank, almost shocked silly. In the cultivation world, anyone who wanted to defeat corpse refinement cultivators had to try their best to avoid the battle corpse while attacking the actual cultivator. That was because the battle corpses were the indestructible weapons of corpse refinement cultivators. Nobody within the same cultivation realm could defeat their battle corpses. If anyone was embroiled in a battle against their battle corpses and could not get out, they would either end up being killed or exhausted to their deaths. That was because battle corpses did not know fatigue. Even if they were completely injured, their strength would not diminish. However, it was different for cultivators. Humans had a limit to their stamina. The white-robed cultivator had cultivated for dozens of years and had been through endless battles against various paragons. However, he had never come across anyone that fought as fiercely as Su Zimo. Notwithstanding the fact that Su Zimo was fighting the corpse itself, he even almost managed to slice it into two with the first attack. Right after, he even turned the battle corpse into a pile of meat sludge with the second attack. Things had ended just like that. The white-robed cultivator was stunned at the moment. A deathly silence filled the air. Initially, Junhao and Si Yutong wanted to attack Su Zimo together with the battle corpse, but now they were rooted silly to the spot, the corners of their eyes twitching and their bodies trembling slightly. That was a Khanate spirit weapon. The two of them could clearly see that the huge golden seal that Su Zimo summoned at the end shone with 6 spirit patterns. It was obvious that it was a Khanate spirit weapon. The deadly poison chi within the battle corpse's flesh was filthy and could destroy weapons and Dharma treasures. Even Ji Yaoshue's supreme-grade flying sword could not escape the fate of being destroyed. But now, the light on the golden seal did not diminish at all even when it was tainted by the battle corpse's blood and flesh. In fact, it shone more intensely, exuding the dominance of an emperor that looked down on the world. A deep look of envy filled Junhao's eyes. I can be as domineering as that if I get my hands on that treasure. Chapter 471. All Dead. Chapter 471. All Dead. Su Zimo's expression changed slightly. The might of the coiling dragon seal had exceeded his expectations. The power that was released was enough to threaten an early-stage golden core. More importantly, an Foundation Establishment Cultivator's Dantian was still in the form of a spirit sea and had yet to form a core. Only golden cores could release the true might of Khanate spirit weapons. Su Zimo was looking forward to how amazing the coiling dragon seal would be at that time. There was a squeaking sound. The stone doors opened and Ji Yaoshue came forth. Their eyes met. Su Zimo smiled and nodded, reassuring her. Instantly, Ji Yaoshue blushed and pursed a smile in return. Su Zimo beckoned gently, and the coiling dragon seal shrank into a small, intricate seal before turning into a streak of light that returned to his storage bag. Walking slowly to the exit of the tunnel, he pushed down with his ankle and his blood quencher returned to his palm. Throughout the entire process, the white-robed cultivator, Junhao and Si Yutong, did not dare to move at all and kept quiet out of fear. Every single action and gaze of Su Zimo caused the three of them to feel immense pressure. Their hearts raced fiercely, as if they could die at any moment. This was an almost invincible aura. Their gazes flickered and their minds were bothered by the same thought. How should they escape? The coiling dragon seal did not merely suppress a battle corpse, but also the final bit of determination in the three of them to want to retaliate. The white-robed cultivator was the first to speak. A rare smile was squeezed out of his dreadfully glum face as he cupped his fists. "Fellow Taoist, you are truly strong. I'm very impressed. I'm nothing compared to you. You're someone who can even suppress the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island." Su Zimo looked at the white-robed cultivator with a fake smile. Bearing an awkward expression, the white-robed cultivator forced a chuckle. "You're joking, fellow Taoist. You're the one who's able to suppress the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island with your skills. I'm far inferior." Su Zimo did not reply and waved his saber. Instantly, Blood Quencher shot forth with a murderous blood beam once more. Blood Quencher was a perfect spirit weapon that was infused with Su Zimo's blood after all. Although it was tainted by the battle corpse's filthy blood, its sharpness could not be hidden. Sensing Su Zimo's killing intent, the white-robed cultivator's heart skipped a beat as he remarked hurriedly, "You can't kill me." "Oh," Su Zimo uttered without raising his head. Composing himself, the white-robed cultivator said in a deep voice, "You should know the status of corpse refinement cult in Tianhuang Mainland. If you kill me, you'll be hunted down by the sect." "Huh, even if I kill you, who would know?" Su Zimo smiled gently. The white-robed cultivator was speechless. On the other hand, Junhao and Si Yutong felt a chilling intent. In other words, what Su Zimo meant was that he was going to kill them all. After killing the three of them, news of this would never ever be spread. There was something else that Su Zimo kept to himself. Corpse refinement cult? I've even killed quite a few paragons from the immortal, fiend, and Buddhist sects. You're just one of them. Clang! The blade shuddered, and a startling blood beam flashed. When Su Zimo attacked once more, the gigantic blade seemed extremely agile in his hands. His slash forward caused ripples in the void. The white-robed cultivator's expression changed starkly. While that slash did not seem fast, there was an inescapable feeling to it. For corpse refinement cult cultivators, losing their battle corpses was as good as losing half of their combat strength. He could not deal with the terrifying saber technique of the Saber Emperor's Sea Calming Manual. A single moment of distraction, and he felt his throat go cold, followed by a ripping pain. A red scar appeared on his throat, turning bigger and more defined. The next moment, a blood mist spewed out. "Ee!" A strange sound came from the depths of the white-robed cultivator's throat as he let out an indignant expression. Collapsing stiffly forward, the light in his eyes dimmed without any life. His throat was slit with a single slash. After killing the corpse refinement cult cultivator, Su Zimo turned around and walked towards Junhao and Si Yutong without hesitation. It was the idea of Junhao and the others. I had no choice as well. That's why I chose the wrong path. When he saw that the situation was amiss, Si Yutong knelt on the ground with a thud. His hand was placed seemingly casually on his storage bag as he bawled without a single shred of dignity as a cultivator. Wiping his snot, Si Yutong said with a quivering voice, "Fellow Taoist Su, please give me a chance." Si Yutong did not have any bit of pity at all towards a fence-sitter like Si Yutong. Today, this man could kneel down and cry before him in order to survive. Tomorrow, this man could stab him in the back instead. Arriving before Si Yutong, Su Zimo looked down and replied indifferently, "At times, once you choose the wrong path, there's no way back." Si Yutong's final hope was dashed after hearing Su Zimo's reply. His hand was still on his storage bag. But now, a dagger with a cold glint had suddenly appeared in his palms. Si Yutong's sobs came to a stop as his expression darkened. With a venomous gaze, he said coldly, Since you won't allow me to live, I'll kill you first. Grabbing his dagger, Qian stabbed towards Su Zimo's chest. This was a complete ambush. However, his thoughts could not escape from Su Zimo's spirit perception. The moment Qian stood up, Su Zimo's palm descended from above and landed heavily on the former's head. Piak. As though it was tofu, Qian's head was splattered and he died on the spot without a single word. The moment Qian attacked, Junhao made up his mind and channeled his spirit energy with all his might as well. In a flash, 7 spirit meridians lit up as he charged towards Ji Yaoxue, who was at the entrance of the stone chamber. Right now, she was his only shot at living. As long as he could hold her hostage, he could talk terms with Su Zimo. As Junhao charged, he realized that Ji Yaoxue was motionless and merely looked at him quietly. There was a trace of mockery and pity in her eyes. All of a sudden, from the side of his eyes, Junhao caught sight of a blood light shooting towards him at lightning speed. It crackled and was shuddering. The moment Qian attacked, Su Zimo flung out his blood quencher. Junhao did not have time to react and merely caught sight of the scarlet flash. Right after, an immense pain came from beneath his ribs as he was sent flying by a powerful impact. Clang! Su Zimo's blood quencher cut through Junhao and pinned the latter tightly against the stone walls. The impact was immensely strong and the saber was still shaking after embedding itself in the stone walls. Junhao's eyes and mouth were widened as fresh blood gushed out uncontrollably. The saber had not only penetrated his body, but also destroyed his organs and cut off his life. You! Raising his arm with much struggle, Junhao pointed at Su Zimo, as if he wanted to say something. After a momentary pause, his head tilted to the side and he died with opened eyes. In less than 10 minutes, all 3 of them were dead. Chapter 472, Stir on Tianhuang Mainland. Chapter 472, Stir on Tianhuang Mainland. Zimo, you've saved me once more. Ji Yaoxue beamed brightly and quipped, I won't be able to clear my debt to you in this lifetime. Su Zimo smiled as well. There's no need to speak of such things between us. 8 Meridian Foundation Establishment. Seems like you've gotten quite a bit of opportunities in the depths of the ancient battlefield. Indeed, I've gotten some. It had to be said that Su Zimo had truly benefited way too much in this ancient battlefield expedition. Notwithstanding the inheritances and treasures, his cultivation realm gained through this 1 year in the ancient battlefield was already enough to make up for dozens of years of cultivation on Tianhuang Mainland. Suddenly, Ji Yaoxue's expression changed as she asked, Xiaoning and the others. Su Zimo's group had 6 people when they left. Now that he was the only one who returned, Ji Yaoxue had a bad feeling about things. Don't worry. Su Zimo waved his hand. All of them received their own opportunities and joined some older and more powerful sections. In fact, some of them might have already left the Tianhuang North region. Xiaoning's Elixir Yang sect was located far away in the Middle Continent. Tianhuang Mainland was boundless and vast. If a foundation establishment cultivator wanted to travel from the North region to the Middle Continent, they would have to be on the road day and night for dozens of years even without resting. That was also without taking into account the possible dangers they might encounter along the way. In reality, it was something that was difficult even for golden cores too. Only nascent souls could protect themselves well enough to attempt to travel out from the North region and roam everywhere. It was likely impossible for the siblings to meet one another in the near future after this separation. That was the reason why Su Zimo wanted Night Spirit to stay by Xiaoning's side and look after her. As for Little Fatty, Longro, Ji Chengtian, and Shijian, they were worlds apart as well. It was unknown if he would still have the chance to meet them in this lifetime. At that thought, Su Zimo could not help but feel slightly emotional and wistful. Zimo, you're still worried about Blood Crow Palace taking revenge, right? Ji Yaoxue was extremely smart, and after slight contemplation, she understood why everyone went their separate ways. Su Zimo had killed the young master of the Blood Crow Palace, and even nearly caused the palace lord himself to die in the primordial ruins. The feud between him and them was already irreconcilable. That day, in the palace, right under the nose of the Emperor of Great Zhou, the Blood Crow King declared that all the disciples of Ethereal Peak would be buried along with the young master. It was obvious how arrogant he was and the amount of backing he had. While it might be a huge calamity for Su Zimo personally, it was also one for Ethereal Peak. Everyone else of Ethereal Peak could leave, but not him. To turn his back and leave after creating such a mess, leaving Ethereal Peak and his eldest brother, Su Hong, in the territory of the Great Zhou dynasty without any care. That was something that Su Zimo's heart would not allow. Zimo, don't worry. I'll help you plead for mercy with father. Worried that Su Zimo might not take her words for real, Ji Yaoshue continued. If the Blood Crow Palace truly dares to do anything outrageous, the Great Zhou dynasty will definitely not sit by idly and watch. Yes. Su Zimo smiled and nodded. In reality, he knew and could read the situation clearer than anyone. The attitude of the Emperor of Great Zhou towards the Blood Crow King at the sect competition had already made many things clear. Even the Great Zhou dynasty was wary of the Blood Crow Palace's lord, or rather, it was cautious of the witch race behind it, one of the primordial 9 races. It was almost hopeless to think that the Great Zhou dynasty would interfere in the matter. Yaoshue, prepare yourself. We'll head to the teleportation spot and return to the Great Zhou dynasty. All right. With the year in the ancient battlefield about to end, many cultivators were returning to Tianhuang Mainland. Some were ecstatic while some were worried. Some cultivators even had a surreal feeling of escaping a great calamity. They could only heal the trauma in their hearts gradually after returning to their sects in Tianhuang Mainland. Right after, heavy news started spreading through the super sects of the cultivation world, akin to gigantic boulders tossed into the middle of lakes and creating massive waves. After 1,000 years, the Saber Emperor's inheritance was obtained by a cultivator and the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea vanished. Right. More than 100 cultivators of Poison Sect were killed by a single person, and even malevolent Earth Sect and Glass Palace were implicated. How savage. Who is he? What sect or faction is he from? I've got no idea. He didn't wear a sect badge. Some say that he's a meek scholar, while others say that he looks menacing. Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth Sect received the news almost instantly, and their sect masters were enraged. Both sects sent out multiple cultivators to scout out news of that cultivator's background and location. Before the various sects managed to digest that news, an even more shocking piece of news was spread, causing a shock for the super sects and sending a wave across the entire cultivation world. The Human Emperor's Palace appeared. The successor of Divine Phoenix Island appeared at the Human Emperor's Palace and fought against all the paragons of the Immortal, Buddhist, and Fiend sects together. The paragons of the Immortal, Buddhist, and Fiend sects work together? Fufu, Divine Phoenix Island's successor sure is unlucky. He must have died without even a corpse left. Who managed to obtain the Human Emperor's inheritance in the end? That's where you're wrong. He suppressed all the paragons of the Immortal, Buddhist, and Fiend sects single-handedly, and it was an extremely tragic and shocking battle. What? What did you say? The paragons of Azura Sect, Heaven Azura Sect, Purple Firmament Sect, Chaos Essence Sect, Clear Wind Temple, Illusion Fiend Cult, and Formless Monastery are all dead. While the paragons of the other sects managed to survive and escape, some of them had their arms and roots crippled, and it would be tough for them to shine in the future. The elders of the various sects received the news at almost the same time and were in shock and disbelief. What about the sealers? There were more than 10 sealers from the Immortal, Buddhist, and Fiend sects together. Are they all trashes? As golden cores, can't any of them kill a single Foundation establishment cultivator? Even when 5 sealers joined forces, they failed and died with regrets. Pust! Even sealers failed despite working together? The right hand of Divine Phoenix Island's successor is made from a Divine Phoenix bone and possess an immense might. He was severely injured together with the Fiend sect's Pure Maiden, and they entered the Human Emperor's Palace at the same time. Their fates are currently unknown. The elders went silent when they heard that. A long time later, someone sighed deeply. It's a monster incarnate. I don't think it's exaggerated to claim that he's the #1 monster incarnate ever since the ancient times. At the same time, in an unknown location in the middle continent, an ancient-looking palace stood erected. A rosy-cheeked old man with a white crown and long robes stood in front of the palace entrance with one hand behind his back. His other hand was in front of him and his fingers were twitching. There was a gray fog that veiled his eyes, making him seem extremely mysterious. Old man, have you divined anything? Behind the old man was a gray-robed man who was slightly plump and had a pale, beardless fan. Holding a folding fan, he asked anxiously. If Su Zimo was here, he would have recognized that this was Lin Xuanji whom he had encountered by chance at the primordial ruins. The old man in front was the storyteller back in the capital of Great Zhou. A long time later, the haze disappeared from the old man's eyes as he frowned while shaking his head. It's true that the human emperor's palace appeared. However, I didn't manage to divine any news of that lad strange. Does Divine Phoenix Island truly have such a monster incarnate? The two of them exchanged glances, feeling that there was something odd about this. Sucking his lips, the old man replied, "No matter what, the appearance of the human emperor's palace proves that this is going to be a golden era with countless paragons and monster incarnates created. It's very likely that we'll have a situation similar to the ancient era with multiple emperors arising. Of course, with that, there will also be unimaginable trouble. Let's just wait and see." Chapter 473, Arrival of the Storm. Chapter 473, Arrival of the Storm. Deep in the night, in the Great Zhou dynasty. With a bang, a bedazzling column of light lit up in the depths of the palace. Bursting into the skies, it filled the night skies with a resplendent luminescence, attracting countless glares. The geniuses who entered the ancient battlefield have returned. That's right. I wonder how many of the 50 managed to survive. There should be a third of them at the very least. The geniuses selected by the 5 major sects aren't weak. Ethereal peaks Qian Yi and Lu Hui, iridescent clouds palaces perfected being Tsanglang and many other golden cores stood around the column of light expectantly, preparing to await their returning disciples. If nothing went wrong, these cultivators that returned alive from the ancient battlefield would end up being the supports of their sects in the future. The Emperor of Great Zhou stood right at the front with a grim expression. A flicker of worry would appear in the depths of his eyes from time to time. Gradually, 2 figures appeared in the middle of the column of light. As time passed by, the 2 figures became increasingly clear. It was Su Zimo and Ji Yaoxue who had returned. The Emperor heaved a sigh of relief. He was relieved as long as Ji Yaoxue was fine. But immediately after, he frowned and thought to himself, there's only the 2 of them? Although the ancient battlefield was a dangerous place, at least 7 people or so managed to return in previous worst-case scenarios. Now that only 2 of them returned, it was not hard to guess that something big must have happened in the ancient battlefield. Qian Yi and Lu Hui did not have smiles on their faces when they saw that Su Zimo was fine. On the one hand, it was because they were worried about the safety of Ji Chengtian and the others. On the other hand, while it was a good thing that Su Zimo was alive, it may not have been the best choice for him to return to the Great Zhou dynasty. Apart from Ethereal Peak, the golden cores of the other sects looked extremely grim as they strode forward with huge frowns. Perfected being Yun Shan of Southern Mountains, sect cupped his fists slightly. Mr. Mo, my disciple, Shi Jian, is a little foolish and isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. Did he meet with any accidents? No, he was selected by one of the 5 heretical doctrines, puppet sect, and left together with them. Su Zimo shook his head. It's good that he's all right. It's his opportunity to be selected by one of the super sections. How rare. How rare. Perfected being Yun Shan nodded his head in gratification. For the sects of the Great Zhou dynasty, super sects such as the 9 immortal sects, 7 fiend sects, 6 Buddhist monasteries, 5 heretical doctrines, and 4 unorthodox groups were insurmountable mountains. If a disciple of their sect managed to join them, it would be an enormous feat, and those sects could not be any happier. For example, with their connection to Shijin, Southern Mountain Sect would most likely have the massive backing of Puppet Sect in the future. What happened in there? Why are you two the only ones who have returned? Where are the others? Liang Mao is my personal disciple, and he was the number 2 of the talisman ranking. His strength is decent, and he has a careful nature. There's no way he could have died. Mr. Mo, did my disciple manage to obtain any opportunities? Many golden cores glared at Su Zimo, asking repeatedly with threatening gazes. Su Zimo frowned with a look of impatience. Everyone, please be silent. Ji Yaoshue stood forward and gestured for silence with both hands. Although she was only a princess, her gesture already possessed the dignity of the royal family. The crowd instantly went silent. In an unhurried manner, Ji Yaoshue recounted the events in the ancient battlefield, including Junhao's true identity, Jiang Yu's betrayal, and Si Yutong's choice. Everyone was startled and speechless. Nobody expected that this ancient battlefield expedition would have met with such immense dangers. Perfected being Songlang's expression was grim as he narrowed his gaze and sneered, "This is only your side of the story. Who knows if you had conspired with Su Zimo to kill my disciple, Si Yutong? Songlang, are you suspecting my daughter?" The emperor turned slightly and glared at Perfected being Songlang expressionlessly. "Ha, I wouldn't dare to." Chuckling, Perfected being Songlang looked at Su Zimo deeply and said in a cold voice, "Lad, don't think that you've got the rights to stand shoulder to shoulder with me just because you know how to refine weapons. The grudges between us will have to be settled sooner or later. Wait and see." With that, Perfected being Songlang laughed sinisterly and left the hall. The other cultivators gradually as well after seeing that they wouldn't be able to obtain any news from the two of them. "Take care." Su Zimo bid farewell to Ji Yaoshue. "You too." Ji Yaoshue's head was slightly lowered, and her eyes revealed a trace of reluctance. Su Zimo left the palace together with Lu Hui and Qian Yi. Along with Nian Shi of Mo's Spirit Weapon Workshop, they boarded a spirit vessel and sped in the direction of Ethereal Peak. A long time after Su Zimo left, Ji Yaoshue was still standing on the spot, gazing in the direction he left in, unwilling to leave. The emperor said softly, "Schwerer, although that man is a rare paragon, it's best for you to not have any contact with him." Ji Yaoshue's heart sank when she heard the emperor's tone. Be it Ethereal Peak or Su Zimo, they are most likely doomed against the impending calamity. After traveling for more than half a month, the 4 of them finally returned to Ethereal Peak. Ever since that battle at Dongling Valley, Su Zimo had left the sect for many years. Now that he had returned once more, he felt deeply emotional. Nianqi was curious and surveyed the place intently. The 4 of them stopped instinctively as they arrived at the tall peak in front of the mountain. Back then, this was where when Xian and Xianyi accepted Su Zimo into Ethereal Peak. The memories were fresh as yesterday. Lu Hui remarked, "It's a pity that when Xian couldn't wait till you've returned." "No matter. If when Xian knows of your current achievements in the afterlife, he'll definitely feel comforted as well." Xianyi patted Su Zimo on the shoulder encouragingly with a smile. "All right, go take a look around the sect and catch up with everyone. Thereafter, go into seclusion as soon as you can." Xianyi gazed at the distance with a grim expression as he murmured softly, "I've got a premonition that a storm is about to arrive." Upon returning to Ethereal Peak, Su Zimo visited the disheveled old man first. Thereafter, he visited the sect master and recounted some of the events of the ancient battlefield. In that period of time, Little Crane came over and chirped repeatedly with extreme joy. After not seeing one another for many years, the man and beast were not distant at all and got along like before. Monkey and the spirit tiger had not returned still, and their locations and fates were unknown. Senior Crane had already been in seclusion for a year, and nothing had happened still. She was the true pillar of support for Ethereal Peak, and if anything happened to her, Ethereal Peak would be destroyed by the impending storm. Su Zimo took a spin around the sect before heading to seclusion. Right now, he was already at the peak of 8 Meridian Foundation establishment. His aim of entering seclusion was to unlock his 9th Spirit Meridian and become a 9 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. This was an extremely important step that would affect his cultivation path in the future. The firmer his foundation, the better the quality of his condensed golden core and the stronger the golden core phenomenon he would be able to comprehend and obtain. At Extreme Foundation Establishment Realm, Su Zimo's combat strength would also increase in folds. Similarly, he could sense the incoming danger. The only way to tide through the impending storm was by trying his best to raise his cultivation realm. Chapter 474, Crisis. Chapter 474, Crisis. Northwest corner of the Great Zhou Dynasty, Black Crow Mountain. Deep in the forest, in a sinisterly dark area, a blood-stained palace was erected. This day, a piece of news arrived. Master, Su Zimo has returned from the ancient battlefield and has arrived at Ethereal Peak. All right. A blood-robed middle-aged man opened his eyes. They shone with a sinister faint green hue as he said coldly, I want nothing in the radius of 50 kilometers around Ethereal Peak to remain alive. His voice was extremely chilling and spread to every single corner of Black Crow Mountain. Countless blood crows flew out from Black Crow Mountain, shrieking as they swarmed the skies with their sheer numbers and flew towards Ethereal Peak. 2 days later, Iridescent Cloud's Palace. An order was sent forth that mobilized the sect. Wage war against Ethereal Peak. Throughout the years, all the sects in the territory of Great Zhou had harbored coveting thoughts towards Ethereal Peak, Iridescent Cloud's Palace included. Everyone knew that the arrival of the order meant that Iridescent Cloud's Palace was absolutely confident. It was extremely likely that for this battle, a void reversion Dao being, Iridescent Cloud's Palace's founder master, would appear. Perfected being Tsang Lang could not help but roar in laughter. Su Zimo, oh, Su Zimo. Even if you managed to cultivate and join Ethereal Peak, so what? At the end of the day, you still can't escape death. Almost at the same time, news spread within True Fire sect that the sect master was leading an army to wage war against Ethereal Peak. True Fire sect's elder, Sima Ji, clenched his fists tightly. He laughed endlessly in a cold manner and sneered, I've finally waited for this day. Su Zimo, you killed my disciple and shamed me at the sect competition. I'm going to turn you into ashes. Not long after, many cultivators of Southern Mountain sect were mobilized. Azure Frost sect. A few golden cores stood together. Among them was Ji Yaoshue's previous master, perfected being Yi Ning, who had appeared at the sect competition. She sighed after hearing the news of everything outside. Actually, this was a situation that everyone had predicted long ago. Ever since the death of Ethereal Peak's founder master, they were already weakened and their only support was an aging demon beast. The foundation of Ethereal Peak was stronger than the other 4 major sects, and they had been established for a long time. Everyone was coveting the countless treasures and secret skills in their sect. Prior to this, the reason why the other sects did not dare to act recklessly was because they were wary of the old immortal crane that was at Void Reversion Realm. Each of the 5 major sects had a Void Reversion expert holding the fort and maintaining the balance. However, all the golden cores and nascent souls of the sects knew that once the old immortal crane was at the end of her lifespan, the balance would be broken and that would be the moment of Ethereal Peak's annihilation. Normally speaking, the other major sects would wait for dozens of years more. But now, with Blood Crow Palace leading the fight, apart from Iridescent Cloud's Palace, True Fire Sect, and Southern Mountain Sect, there would be other sects and cultivators coming forth to Ethereal Peak to take advantage of the situation. It was most likely the same for Perfected being Yi Ning's Azure Frost Sect. Everyone kicks a man who is down. She sighed gently. She could not help but feel regret when she recalled the scholarly green-robed cultivator at the sect competition. Within 10 days, all the sects within the territory of Great Zhou heard about this and moved one after another. Their target was Ethereal Peak. So what if you're the number 1 weapon refinement master of Great Zhou? At the end of the day, you're just doing it for all of us. Hee hee, Notwithstanding the secret skills of Ethereal Peak, there are countless high-grade spirit weapons in Mr. Mo's possession alone. Instantly, the world was moving. Ethereal Peak. Hundreds of golden cores stood in Ethereal Palace, most of them discussing in hushed whispers with grim expressions. Sect Master Ling Yun sat in the middle of everyone. His eyes were closed and he was expressionless. Reporting in, Sect Master. A golden core strode hastily into the hall and said deeply, "Some blood-eyed crows have suddenly appeared in the forest outside the sect and more are gathering." "Got it." Sect Master Ling Yun replied indifferently. He did not open his eyes still. The hearts of many golden cores skipped a beat as they thought to themselves, "It's coming." At the end of the day, they could not avoid this crisis still. Initially, this crisis would take another dozens of years to arrive with the backing of the old immortal Crane. However, nobody expected that something would change in this period of time. By some freak accident, Su Zimo was embroiled in an irreconcilable feud with Blood Crow Palace's lord, and that resulted in the situation today. It's all Su Zimo's fault. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have made enemies with a sect as strong as Blood Crow Palace. Finally, a golden core could not help but bark with a grim expression. "That's right." Someone else declared, "Sect Master, let's just hand over Su Zimo. Perhaps it might help to quell the anger of Blood Crow Palace." "That's correct. Why should Ethereal Peak die together for Su Zimo's feud?" The voices of dissent were growing louder in the hall, and many golden cores were moved. "Bullshit." The disheveled old man could not help but curse as he blew at his beard with widened eyes. Pointing at the golden cores who spoke, he shouted, "How dare you have the cheek to speak of such words? Do you think that we wouldn't have a feud with Blood Crow Palace if Su Zimo wasn't here? Who was the one who killed so many cultivators of our sect in the battle at Dongling Valley? Who was the one who killed Peak Master when Qian?" The disheveled old man's question caused everyone to go silent. The few golden cores who spoke at the start were quiet as well. Loudly, the disheveled old man hollered, "Everything else aside, if not for Su Zimo, all our disciples at Dongling Valley would have died in the battle. Instead, you guys are talking about his great deed like it was a mistake. Have your consciences been eaten up by dogs?" The disheveled old man's angry scolding reverberated in the hall deafeningly. Qian Yi stood up and said grimly, "Additionally, back at the sect competition, if Su Zimo hadn't held the fort, Ethereal Peak would have been thoroughly shamed and turned into a joke of the cultivation world of Great Zhou. Countless people would be disheartened if we hand over a disciple as such." "That's enough." Opening his eyes, Sect Master Ling Yun said calmly, "Even if Su Zimo did not contribute as he did and was merely an ordinary disciple of Ethereal Peak, there's no way we will cast him out. Ethereal Peak wouldn't have survived till this day if we sacrificed our disciples for the sake of survival. At the same time, I'm not able to do something like that either. Everyone has their ambitions, and those who want to leave the sect, do it now. I won't stop you." Sect Master Ling Yun swept his gaze across the crowd. Some cultivators cupped their fists and left one after another, but even more chose to stay. Among the crowd, an outstanding girl with withered, yellow hair stood. She smiled gently upon seeing everything unfold and her eyes were bright and moving. Previously, Nianqi accompanied Su Zimo back to Ethereal Peak and had been listening and observing in secret ever since. She wandered everywhere and had no home since she was young. As such, it was hard for her to trust people. Towards such a foreign environment and these new people, she was conflicted and resistant. However, she did not dare to bother Su Zimo since he was in seclusion. Yet, as time passed by, her impression of this sect gradually changed. There was a group of lovely cultivators within, and there were also righteous people. At that moment, after she heard the words of Sect Master Ling Yun, Nianqi made up her mind that she was going to stay in Ethereal Peak from now on, never forsaking it. Chapter 475, Ignition of the Great Battle. Chapter 475, Ignition of the Great Battle. There were more blood crows gathered at the forest outside, circling above Ethereal Peak in an orderly manner. They formed a gigantic black vortex that covered the skies, like thunderclouds that flickered with scarlet glints. It was extremely pressuring. Darkness fell on Ethereal Peak, and it has been 3 days since they saw sunlight. This day, dust billowed from far away, followed by a torrential killing intent. The army of cultivators from Blood Crow Palace had arrived. For the past few years, Blood Crow Palace's influence had been expanding, and they took over all the sects in the vicinity and grew at a rapid pace. By now, they were as good as a 6th major sect. Coupled with the cruel methods of Blood Crow Palace's lord and his heavenly-defying combat strength, many itinerant cultivators submitted to him one after another. Blood Crow Palace's current strength had already surpassed the 5 major sects. Leaping into the skies, Ethereal Peak's master, Ling Yun, gazed over with a grim expression. The army from Blood Crow Palace was densely packed, and there were 10,000 cultivators. Among them, there were 100 nascent souls alone, and many of them were notorious itinerant cultivators in the cultivation world of Great Zhou. There were more than 1,000 golden cores. The rest of them were foundation establishment cultivators, and there were no Qi refinement warriors. Qi refinement warriors were almost useless in a clash of this level. Any single flying sword, spirit art, or even the shockwave of the ensuing fight was more than enough to kill a Qi refinement warrior. A blood-robed middle-aged man stood at the front of Blood Crow Palace's massive army, looking cold with a faint green hue in his eyes. It was Blood Crow Palace's lord. The palace lord waved his hand and declared icily, "Kill everyone and spare no one." At the same time, Ethereal Peak's master, Ling Yun, waved his arm and yelled, "The sect is on the brink of its extinction. People, fight with all your strength and protect the final sanctuary of our sect." Everyone from Ethereal Peak knew that there was no other way out for them. Bang, bang, bang. In the back mountain, stone doors were pushed apart by tremendous forces one after another as dozens of terrifying auras appeared. Ethereal Peak's nascent souls who were in seclusion had appeared one after another as well. Under the lead of Sect Master Ling Yun, 100 nascent souls and nearly 1,000 golden cores were mobilized. In terms of numbers, they were comparable to Blood Crow Palace. Their formidable foundation was thoroughly shown. However, due to the stringent requirement process of Ethereal Peak, there were not many foundation establishment cultivators, and they amounted to slightly more than 2,000. Once the Great Battle was invoked, their foundation establishment cultivators would definitely be disadvantaged. Of course, the final outcome of the battle was not decided from the foundation establishment battlefield, nor was it decided from the Golden Core and Nascent Soul battlefields. The ultimate challenge was between the Void Reversion experts. Caw-caw. The countless blood crows let out ear-piercing cries, charging towards the Ethereal Peak cultivators like a swarm of locusts. It was startling. All of a sudden, a might aura burst forth from within Ethereal Peak, followed by a deafening cry. A figure broke out of seclusion, bearing a head of red hair and exuding a terrifying demonic aura. Although she had an insane might and a sharp gaze, this was a beauty. Senior Crane. Senior Crane has come forth from seclusion. A series of cheers sounded from Ethereal Peak, and the masses were overjoyed. The old immortal Crane looked at the countless incoming blood crows, and her eyes shone brightly. A mysterious shockwave spread out from her glabella as she suddenly opened her mouth and shot out a fiery stream of flames. Swoosh! The stream of flames spread out and was hundreds of feet tall, incinerating half the skies. Countless blood crows were turned into ashes without being able to make a single sound. Humph! Blood Crow Palace's lord harumphed coldly and soared into the air. With a single thought, a blood-colored bone staff appeared in his hands with a skull at its tip, emanating a sinister aura. Blood Pattern Curse. Waving his blood-bone staff, the palace lord chanted an unidentifiable incantation, and the void surged with a terrifying energy feedback. 2 streams of blood light shot forth from the sockets of the skull. As though it was alive, the the skull opened its mouth and shot out a green streak of light. The blood and green light fused into a drop of fresh blood. When the drop of blood arrived above the old immortal crane's head, it suddenly exploded and spread into a series of mysterious patterns. Descending slowly, it engulfed the old immortal crane. Buzz, buzz. The blood patterns formed a blood-colored circle of light that caused smoke to form each time it made contact with the old immortal crane's body. Eventually, it corroded the old immortal crane's shirt, and a series of burn marks appeared on its fair skin beneath. Caw! The old immortal crane cried, and its blood chi burst forth. Instantly, its body and flesh expanded while its bones changed structures as it transformed. Right in front of everyone, it turned into a massive, ferocious bird that was dozens of feet in width, ready to fly with its wings at any moment. Resembling an immortal crane, the ferocious bird had a smudge of red on its head, and its body was green. A thin, dense layer of flame burned on its body, emitting a scorching heat, and its beak was red and a full 10 feet long. The Blood Crow Palace's lord's expression changed as he murmured softly, "So, your true form is actually a pure-blooded, ferocious bird." The old immortal crane soared into the skies, and the flames on its body burned brightly, purging away the power of the blood curse. Rising into the clouds with its gigantic body, it looked down at the palace lord on the ground with a murderous intent. "Fufu, you might have been a threat to me at your peak, but now, you're nothing but a beast at the end of your lifespan and is nothing to be feared." The palace lord sneered and leaped up. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared above the 9 heavens into the clouds. That was a height that even nascent souls could not reach. Although golden cores could soar into the skies without the use of any external objects, the truth was that there was a limit to the height they could reach, and it was merely about 100 feet. There was an incredibly strong dermic power between the heaven and earth that restricted cultivators and all living beings immensely. The higher cultivators flew, the greater the pressure they would have to endure. With their essence spirits, nascent souls could greatly resist the restrictions on their bodies set by the heaven and earth and could soar to heights a couple thousand feet high. More than that, one would be in the clouds and their vision and hearing would suffer. At that place where even nascent souls could not reach, only void reversions could fight there. The great battle was invoked beneath Ethereal Peak. Blood Crow Palace's lord and the old immortal crane clashed as well, producing shuddering power shockwaves that attracted the attention of a few void reversions nearby. Those void reversions came from Iridescent Clouds Palace, True Fire Sect, Southern Mountains Sect, and Azure Frost Sect. The armies of the 4 major sects were speeding towards Ethereal Peak under the lead of their void reversion experts. That old beast has sure hidden herself well. To think that she's a ferocious beast of the ancient era, a Bai Fong. The Bai Fong was a pure-blooded ferocious beast that did not need to consume food and specialized in the Tao of Fire. Legend has it that the Bai Fong carried the bloodline of the Phoenix race and was extremely ferocious. While the Bai Fong looked extremely similar to immortal cranes, their difference was that their head was a full feet wide. It's lucky that the Blood Crow Palace's lord is around. Otherwise, the 4 of us might have been destroyed by that old beast instead. Yes, the Bai Fong is old now. Furthermore, I heard that the Blood Crow Palace's lord belongs to one of the 9 primordial races. Even if the Bai Fong was at its peak, it might not be a match for this guy. Let's go. Let's head over there first to help the Blood Crow Palace's lord kill that old beast as soon as possible. After conversing, the 4 void reversions soared into the skies and vanished in the blink of an eye. It wouldn't be long before the armies of the other 4 major sects arrived at Ethereal Peak. Chapter 476, Fatal Blow. Chapter 476, Fatal Blow. With the fight between the void reversions taking place, nascent souls from both factions soared into the skies one after another to a height of a few thousand feet tall before breaking out into a battle. At that height, the fight between the nascent souls would not affect the golden cores and foundation establishment cultivators. Every single attack of a nascent soul possessed the might of the heaven and earth, and it was something that golden cores couldn't defend against. As for golden cores, they left the ground and flew 100 feet into the skies before they started fighting. Countless spirit arts and flying swords streaked, and there were even golden core phenomenons. On the ground, Foundation establishment cultivators collided intensely like two massive torrents. Blood Crow Palace did not have the advantage in numbers when it came to nascent souls and golden cores. However, they had multiple times the number of Foundation establishment cultivators of Ethereal Peak. The moment the fight began, Ethereal Peak showed signs of defeat on the Foundation establishment battlefield. In recent years, most of Ethereal Peak's paragons of the Foundation establishment realm died in Dongling Valley. The rest, such as Ji Tian, Long Ro, and the others, obtained their own opportunities and left the territory of the Great Zhou dynasty. The remaining Foundation establishment cultivators in the sect had no leader, and the strongest among them was only at 5 Meridian Foundation establishment, with a few others at 4. As for the 9,000-odd Foundation establishment cultivators on Blood Crow Palace's side, there were 2 of them at 6 Meridian Foundation establishment and dozens at 5. In the ancient battlefield, especially at the core regions where battles were plenty, 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators were common sight, and only 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators could protect themselves. However, in the territory of Great Zhou, the environment was not as favorable as the ancient battlefield, and it was almost the limit for any cultivator to unlock 6 spirit meridians. Bang! 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 The moment the battle began, Ethereal Peak Foundation establishment cultivators were already showing signs of defeat. There was nothing to compensate for the difference in numbers and strength. The most eye-catching cultivator on the side of Ethereal Peak was an outstanding young girl. This outstanding young girl was not old, and her features were intricate with a straight nose bridge. Her eyes shimmered like diamonds, but her hair was withered, yellow, and messy without any luster. This young girl was none other than Yin Qi. After cultivating for less than 2 years, she was already at the peak of Foundation establishment and had already unlocked 3 spirit meridians. It was also because of Yin Qi's presence that the Ethereal Peak Foundation establishment cultivators were not instantly overwhelmed and defeated. Controlling her flying sword with one hand, she wielded a saber in the other and charged into the Blood Crow Palace crowd, cleaving left and right. Initially, back when Yin Qi did not have any spirit qi in her body, she was already able to lift the mystic gold silk armor which weighed a ton. It could be said that she had an innate godly strength. Now that she had entered the path of cultivation, her strength had grown even more, and she was like a tiger who had obtained wings. Although she was only at 3 Meridian Foundation establishment, she could kill 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators and even face off against 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. Swinging her saber widely, Yin Qi was completely following Su Zimo's previous style without any complicated movements. He was overwhelming everything with brute force. Unable to defend against her, a 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator was cut into 2. Gradually, the 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators of Blood Crow Palace surrounding Yin Qi increased, and even 2 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators had targeted her. Let's join forces and kill that girl first. A 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator yelled. Bang! 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 Swoosh! 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 At least 10 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators attacked Yin Qi at the same time. 2 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators released their spirit arts and flying swords as well, unleashing a flurry of attacks at Yin Qi. Instantly, Yin Qi descended into danger. She had already charged into the depths of the Blood Crow Palace faction a long time ago and was far away from the Ethereal Peak faction. Right now, she was like a helpless leaf floating in a raging sea. Yin Qi did not wish to die. She wanted to continue staying in Ethereal Peak and following her young master. However, she knew that in such a situation where everyone could barely fend for themselves, no one could save her. The only way she could survive was if she fought for herself. Against the attacks that came from all directions, Nian Qi shivered and channeled blood qi with all her might. Gradually, her eyes turned into a mysterious shade of blue, akin to the color of the deep ocean. A terrifying aura exuded from within her. It was as though an ancient power had been awakened. Ah! Roaring into the skies, Nian Qi let out an ear-piercing shriek. Her initially wrinkly hair turned silky smooth, swaying on its own and giving off a bright luster. Although she had nothing beneath her feet, she rose slowly into the air and stood upright. It was like a godly being of the universe with a pair of azure blue eyes and golden dancing hair. Her magnificence was outstanding and blinding. That scene did not cause much of a stir to the golden cores and nascent souls. No matter what, Nian Qi was just a foundation establishment cultivator. While the aura that she suddenly gave off was terrifying and even shuddering, it was not strong enough to threaten the golden cores. However, thousands of feet above the clouds, the expression of Blood Crow Palace's lord who was embroiled in a battle currently changed. His gaze penetrated the voids and landed on Nian Qi. Could it be? The palace lord's eyes shimmered, as if he had recalled something. On the battlefield, just as Nian Qi was about to be drowned by the countless spirit arts and weapons, a burst of energy shot forth from within her. Buzz! The spirit weapons that were arriving from all directions froze in midair. Even the spirit arts shook violently before dissipating. All the Foundation establishment cultivators present were shocked when they saw that. A 3-Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator had managed to defend against the full-powered attacks of 10 5-Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators and 2 6-Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. That scene had already surpassed everyone's knowledge. It was a 3-level gap right there. After a momentary pause, all the spirit weapons flew back in reverse and Nian Qi's gaze gradually dimmed. She turned extremely weak and fell from midair, as though she had lost all her strength. Caw, caw. The sound of a crane echoed out as a green streak of light shot by, carrying Nian Qi before retreating at an even faster speed. The one that saved Nian Qi was none other than Little Crane. Ha 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 ha. Right then, a series of laughter broke out from the horizons far away. I'm Dao Being Jing Ming of Iridescent Clouds Palace. Greetings, Blood Crow Palace's lord. I'm Dao Being Liao Yuan of True Fire Sect, here to assist the palace lord. I'm Dao Being Lao Yang of Southern Mountain Sect. I'm Dao Being Han Ming of Azure Frost Sect, here to help the palace lord kill that old beast. For terrifying auras surged over and climbed thousands of feet into the clouds instantly, surrounding the old immortal crane. The ethereal peak cultivators felt their hearts sink. The immortal crane was old, and it did not have a clear advantage against Blood Crow Palace's lord. But now, there were 4 more void reversion experts. Spirit vessels sped over from the horizon with a murderous intent. Not long after, cultivators of the other 4 sects arrived. There were a full 200 nascent souls and 2,000 golden cores combined from the other 4 sects. Together, there were more than 10,000 Foundation establishment cultivators. The insertion of such a massive amount of power into the battlefield was almost a fatal blow for Ethereal Peak. Initially, Ethereal Peak was holding its ground on the nascent soul and golden core battlefields. But now, all 4 battlefields of Ethereal Peak had fallen into an encirclement and could collapse at any moment to be entirely annihilated. Almost at the same time, a deafening bang sounded from a cave abode within Ethereal Peak. A figure had broken out of seclusion. Chapter 477, Desperate Situation. Chapter 477, Desperate Situation. With the addition of the other 4 major sects, the situation of the battle changed. The old immortal crane was fighting 1 against 5 and spread its wings, causing gusts of wind to howl and the clouds to shift endlessly. Dermic powers filled the skies as it roared in anger, fighting with its fullest strength. Although the old immortal crane was aged, it still had the remaining dominance as a pure-blooded ferocious bird. Sure. It released a shocking demonic skill, and tens of thousands of feathered wings shot forth from its body. Burning with scarlet flames, each feathered wing was like an apocalyptic spear. Shooting forward fiercely, they tore through the voids and left countless holes. Let a blood curse mirror be formed with my blood. The Blood Crow Palace's lord bit his fingertip and flicked out a drop of fresh blood. Waving his bone staff, he guided that drop of blood and drew an obscure arc in midair. Chanting an incantation, he created a mirror of blood water swiftly before him. The flurry of red feathered wings shot over and created blood waves as they collided against the surface of the mirror before their flames were extinguished. The other 4 void reversions did not dare to be careless and defended with all their might. Instantly, dermic powers surged and runes appeared, shaking the world as endless light burst forth. The void was illuminated, and it seemed as though the firmaments were collapsing. That demonic technique had expended almost all of the old immortal crane's remaining life essence. Its gaze dimmed slightly, no longer as sharp as before. Not far away from Ethereal Peak, an army of cultivators clad in armor appeared in the void. All of them stood upright in midair, wielding long spears, looking stoic. It was an army of golden cores. A carriage was escorted in the middle of the army. In front of the carriage stood 2 people, a man and a woman. The middle-aged man wore yellow robes and frowned deeply. Looking at the great battle above the clouds, he shook his head and sighed. "Schwer, as you wished, I've brought you here. You can see for yourself now that it's going to be tough for Ethereal Peak to avoid this calamity." The man and woman were the Emperor of Great Zhou and Ji Yaoshue. Ji Yaoshue could not help but ask, "Father, why do you refuse to lend them a hand? Our Great Zhou dynasty clearly has more than one void reversion to back us up." The emperor shook his head in silence. Ji Yaoshue continued, "Furthermore, I heard that there's a patriarch in Great Zhou who is still alive, and he is a Dharma characteristic Tao Lord. The Dharma characteristic realm came after the void reversion realm. Those that are in the void reversion realm gain the title of Tao Being, while those in the Dharma characteristic realm gain the title of Tao Lord." After a moment of silence, the emperor said softly, "Schwer, actually, the patriarch was the one who made the decision to not interfere." "Why?" Ji Yaoshue was in disbelief as she questioned, "As a Dharma characteristic Tao Lord, can't the patriarch beat a void reversion Tao Being? What are you guys scared of?" "Heis." The emperor gave a deep sigh. If the patriarch comes forth, he can naturally suppress the Blood Crow Palace's lord. However, the thing is that this guy's background is extremely touchy. He is one of the primordial 9 races. So what if he's one of the primordial 9 races? Weren't they defeated by the ancient emperors of the human race in the primordial era all the same? Ji Yaoshue could not understand. As though he recalled something, a hint of fear flickered through the depths of the emperor's eyes as he shook his head. The might of the primordial 9 races is far beyond what you can imagine. If we really anger the experts of the primordial 9 races, notwithstanding the Great Zhou dynasty, even the entire north region of Tianhuang Mainland would experience a catastrophe. Back then, the patriarch witnessed and had been through a similar catastrophe personally. Pausing for a moment, the emperor did not continue on that topic. Let's hope that Su Zimo has already left Ethereal Peak. On the other side, 2 outstanding women with voluptuous figures stood within the ancient forest. One of them was older, but there were no signs of aging on her face. Instead, she gave off a mature and charming aura from head to toe. The other was dressed in a long pink dress and wore a veil, looking like she was a young girl. "Auntie Gu, since Su Zimo hasn't shown himself yet, I suppose he must have already left and is no longer at Ethereal Peak," the girl in pink said with joy. The 2 of them were the chief steward of Sky Treasure Auction House, Gu Shi, and the pure maiden of the fiend sects, Demoness Ji. That had better be the case. Given the circumstances, he would die for sure if he appeared. Gu Shi's expression was unchanged. The Blood Crow Palace's lord is someone from the witch race, and they are one of the primordial 9 races. The impact left on the cultivation world after that catastrophe 10,000 years ago was way too deep. let alone the patriarch of the great Zhou dynasty. Even those of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend sects would be cautious and not want to provoke the primordial 9 races. Demonist Ji shook her head. That's not for sure. That senior of the fiend sect definitely fears nothing. Pausing for a moment, Demonist Ji tugged at Gu Shi's sleeves and asked, Auntie Gu, haven't you sent the message yet? What did that senior say? What can he say? Gu Shi pouted her lips. He is cold and merciless. When he heard my message, he didn't even have any reaction mentally. Don't pin your hopes on him. At Ethereal Peak, the battle was intensifying. On the Nascent Soul battlefield, Sect Master Ling Yuan was already at perfected Nascent Soul realm and was a step away from Void Reversion realm. With his terrifying combat strength, he fought at the front and held on bitterly. It was a complete defeat for the Golden Core and Foundation Establishment battlefields. Nian Qi was exhausted and frightfully pale. Lying on Little Crane, it was difficult for her to recover in a short period of time. The Foundation Establishment cultivators of Blood Crow Palace and the other 4 major sects charged over like a relentless torrent, rushing at the Ethereal Peak Foundation Establishment faction repeatedly. During this period of time, some of the smaller sects and itinerant cultivators of Great Zhou seized the opportunity to take part in the battlefield, ready to take advantage of the situation as well. Without Nian Qi, the Ethereal Peak Foundation Establishment cultivators were retreating repeatedly, leaving behind a trail of corpses. Blood flowed like a river, and it was extremely tragic. The situation on the Golden Core battlefield was even more pressing. Golden Cores of Ethereal Peak were dying repeatedly. True Fire Sect Sima, she controlled 4 flaming flying swords that streaked through the crowd endlessly, leaving streams of scorching sword chi. Where's that little bastard, Suzimo? Are you still going to continue hiding? Now that the outcome was set, Sima Ji roared in laughter gleefully. Perfected being Tsang Lang controlled his flying sword and his long, narrow eyes shone with a cold glint. The entire Ethereal Peak will have to die together just for the sake of a Foundation Establishment cultivator, Su Zimo. His remark caused the Ethereal Peak faction, which was already getting defeated steadily, to turn even messier. To hell with you. The disheveled old man had a fiery temper and cursed. However, immediately after, his slight distraction caused him to suffer a gash on the wound from perfected being Tsang Lang, and blood flowed like a stream. Xianyi summoned his hexagonal sword formation and had to give it his best before he could rescue the disheveled old man. Fufu, open your eyes properly and take a look. Perfected being Tsang Lang pointed at the Foundation Establishment battlefield beneath their feet and sneered, Ethereal Peak's Foundation Establishment cultivators are almost completely dead. Xianyi and the disheveled old man's hearts skipped a beat. On the ground, Nian Qi's group retreated step after step and were already at the base of the mountain. Of the 2,000 Foundation Establishment cultivators, there were only a few hundred left battling bitterly right now. All of the disciples carried injuries and panted heavily. They were almost at their limits. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Right then, 10 streaks of dark light shot forward from the back of the mountain, sending forth a shuddering impact. As the 10 dark lights streaked through, a terrifying air current surged and smashed the tiles on the ground. The mud was overturned and 10 long ravines were formed. Fast as lightning, a green-robed cultivator surged over with a murderous intent. Flapping his spirit wings furiously, he wielded a gigantic moon-colored bow and exuded a torrential aura. Chapter 478, Extreme Foundation Establishment, the Second Human Emperor. Chapter 478, Extreme Foundation Establishment, the Second Human Emperor. The 10 dark lights arrived instantly and shot into the crowd viciously. Poof, poof, poof. Flashes of blood appeared. The 10 dark lights were so strong that their momentums were still ferocious even after penetrating the bodies of more than 10 cultivators. They were unstoppable. The terrifying power of the dark lights even surged through some of the cultivators after passing through them, causing them to explode with their limbs flying everywhere. All the ethereal peak cultivators witnessed the massive torrent formed by more than 20,000 Foundation establishment cultivators stop just because of 10 dark lights that were streaking through. Within the torrent, there were 10 lines filled with countless corpses and endless blood. The cultivators of Blood Crow Palace, the other 4 major sects and multiple small sects had swarmed over. Coupled with itinerant cultivators from all over the place, they were way too densely packed. The 10 dark lights were extremely lethal. There were at least a few hundred Foundation establishment cultivators who died on the spot. With more than 20,000 cultivators on the Blood Crow Palace's faction, the few hundred dead Foundation establishment cultivators could not be considered as a great amount of damage. However, it created a trauma within everyone's hearts. Su Zimo. Someone with a keen eye exclaimed upon recognizing the identity of the green-robed cultivator. No wonder the dark lights were so terrifyingly lethal. Hurry, look. The bow in his hand is a perfect spirit weapon. Indeed, many Foundation establishment cultivators were jealous and were raring to give it a shot. They had heard long ago that Su Zimo was the #1 weapon refinement master of Great Zhou, and the lousiest weapons in his storage bag were supreme-grade spirit weapons. In fact, he even possessed perfect spirit weapons. The rumors were true. Many Golden Cores turned to look from the Golden Core battlefield. On the sect competition, Su Zimo had made a name for himself, and how could anyone not know or have not heard of the title of the #1 weapon refinement master of Great Zhou? True Fire Sect Sima Ji's eyes lit up as he roared in laughter. Good. Su Zimo, you've got guts to appear. I'll have you pay for my disciple's death. Perfected being Songlang's long, narrow eyes were locked on Su Zimo. Looking down from above, he sneered, Su Zimo, so what if you manage to join Ethereal Peak? You still can't escape death. A few years ago, back in Pingyang Town, I should have killed you together with that beast. No matter how you struggle, you can't fight against the cycle of your fate. Su Zimo's gaze was indifferent as he stood on midair and surveyed the surroundings. His gaze seemed to contain an enormous might that could overwhelm and overpower everything. The Foundation establishment cultivators on the side of Blood Crow Palace felt their hearts clench when they met with Su Zimo's eyes. That person gave off a frightening aura. That was an aura that was built from endless bloodshed and countless corpses. In the ancient battlefield, even many paragons of the immortal, Buddhist, and fiend cultivation sects died in his hands. Since the strongest cultivators here were only at 6 Meridian Foundation establishment at best, none of them could withstand Su Zimo's aura. When he saw the corpses of Ethereal Peak disciples on the ground, Su Zimo's killing intent spewed out of his eyes. Die! Putting away his moon concealment bow, Su Zimo's sleeves waved and 18 supreme-grade flying swords appeared. However, all 18 of them disappeared in the blink of an eye, forming ripples in the void, as though fishes were gliding through water. Not good. That's Ethereal Peak's secret skill. Everyone, watch out. Arg. Someone screamed tragically. Sword light flashed, and a few 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators died on the spot without any chance to fight back at all. Condense. A 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator crushed multiple protection talismans and released High Sect's secret skill. Right after, he took out a supreme-grade defensive shield, used it to block in front of him. Clang! The flying sword did not pause at all upon colliding with his supreme-grade shield, causing the latter to explode immediately. Poof, poof, poof. Against Su Zimo's flying sword, his secret skills and protection talismans were akin to paper and were disintegrated instantly. A flash of blood appeared, and a gigantic head fell down neatly. A 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator was dead. The Blood Crow Palace faction was in chaos, and the expressions of many cultivators changed. How could that be? They were both supreme-grade spirit weapons, but why did the other party's flying sword destroy the shield immediately? Unless... Many cultivators turned over instinctively. Pissed. In midair, underneath Su Zimo's green robes, spirit meridians shone one after another in a bedazzling manner, wrapping around his body like metal chains. 1, 2, 3. 9 spirit meridians. Was it a hallucination? Many cultivators rubbed their eyes and looked again before gasping. Pissed. There were a full 9 spirit meridians. Even 8 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivators would be able to barbarically suppress the entire Foundation Establishment battlefield, let alone a 9 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator. As Su Zimo stood on midair, his Dantian spirit churned rapidly and rich spirit energy surged through his 9 spirit meridians. He was like a god of the universe with a mighty aura. Many cultivators were aghast. The Foundation Establishment cultivators were not the only ones. Even the golden cores and nascent souls were shocked when they saw what was going on. In the territory of Great Zhou, it has been 1,000 years since there was even an 8 Meridian Foundation Establishment cultivator. As for 9 Meridian Foundation Establishment, ever since the ancient era, there had never been a second person to reach that realm apart from the human emperor. The legends are true. The 9th Spirit Meridian can truly be unlocked. Extreme Foundation Establishment, the second human emperor. A wary look flashed through perfected being Songlang's eyes, followed by a feeling of trepidation. It was lucky that Ethereal Peak was on the brink of annihilation and Su Zimo wouldn't be able to escape death. Otherwise, if that lad were to grow further, who in the territory of Great Zhou would be able to stop him? He is the #1 weapon refinement master of Great Zhou, and now, he's even at the Extreme Foundation Establishment realm. Once he forms a core, he would definitely develop a phenomenon as well. Sect Master Ling Yun sighed internally. Such was the cruelty of fate. They could only blame the sect for being unlucky. If they had not met with such a calamity, with talents such as Ji Qingtian, Long Ro, and the others, they would definitely rise to be the #1 sect of the Great Zhou dynasty. As for Su Zimo, his accomplishments would even be more limitless. In fact, he might even be able to lead Ethereal Peak to become one of the top factions of Tianhuang Mainland. Alas, the Blood Crow Palace's lord narrowed his eyes and his killing intent deepened. His personal feud with Su Zimo aside, the fact that this lad was at Extreme Foundation Establishment meant that he had to be killed. A second human emperor must not be allowed to appear on Tianhuang Mainland. The 18 supreme-grade flying swords streaked through the crowd, and none of the Foundation Establishment cultivators could defend it all. It was a complete massacre. The massive flood formed by more than 20,000 Foundation Establishment cultivators was punctured and pushed back by Su Zimo single-handedly. Everyone from Ethereal Peak was reinvigorated. At that moment, Su Zimo flapped his spirit wings and rose into the air. He was actually arriving at the Golden Core battlefield 100 feet high. Zimo, hurry back down. The disheveled old man shouted hurriedly when he saw that. The fight between Foundation Establishment cultivators would only take place on the ground, and no one would soar into the skies 100 feet high. Given the chaotic battlefield, the flying swords and spirit arts of Golden Cores carried an absolutely destructive power against Foundation Establishment cultivators. To everyone, Su Zimo's move was complete suicide. Ha 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 ha. Composing himself, Sima Ji roared into laughter. Even if you're at Extreme Foundation Establishment, you're still just a Foundation Establishment cultivator. Everything is futile before you form a core, and you'll never ever be able to experience the power of being at Golden Core realm. It's been a long time since I've experienced the feeling of murdering a talent. Perfected being Songlang smiled gently and said coldly, Su Zimo, thank you for granting me that feeling today. Chapter 479, Ancient Dragonification Manual. Chapter 479, Ancient Dragonification Manual. Swoosh. Many Foundation Establishment cultivators and Golden Cores unleashed their attacks towards Su Zimo, who was standing in midair. Instantly, hundreds and thousands of spirit weapons and arts swarmed forward. The void quaked and the entire world dimmed instantly. The Golden Cores of Ethereal Peak were disadvantaged in numbers after all. By this point of the battle, Qian Yi and the others were thoroughly exhausted, and he could not even conjure a sword formation. Embroiled in battle with hundreds of Golden Cores, Qian Yi and the others could not pull themselves out to assist Su Zimo at all. Furthermore, even if they could, all of them would most likely die against such intense and terrifying attacks. All of a sudden, Su Zimo's black hair swayed without any wind and his eyes shone with a deep glint. Suddenly, a shuddering aura burst forth from within his body. It was an ancient and vicissitude aura that was awakened. When the spirit weapons and arts arrived in Su Zimo's vicinity, they slowed down as though they had entered a swamp until finally, they could not advance at all. Stopped. The flurry of spirit weapons that shone resplendently, as well as the shimmering spirit arts, hovered in midair motionlessly. Many cultivators were shocked. How could that be? The next moment, an even more shocking scene appeared that caused chills to run down everyone's hearts. An extremely long, illusory figure of a living being appeared around Su Zimo, hovering in midair. Gradually, it materialized as flesh started forming. The living being was filled with green scales that shimmered coldly. One after another, sharp spikes protruded from its back and its fangs and claws were extremely sharp while its horns stood proudly. Its eyes were extremely cold and domineering. What's going on? Is that a true dragon? Against the gaze of the azure dragon, everyone felt like they were as insignificant as ants. The Foundation establishment cultivators on the ground broke out in sweat and suffocated. Unable to withstand that sort of might, they shuddered and almost knelt on the ground to kowtow. Even the golden cores in midair were stricken and frightfully pale. What is that? The 6 void reversions above the clouds were shocked. The ancient Dragonification manual was a secret skill unique to the human emperor. Ever since the ancient era, Su Zimo was the second person to cultivate it successfully, and by now, almost no one recognized that secret skill. Even the gaze of Blood Crow Palace's lord was a little lost. That azure dragon looked familiar, but it was much smaller, like a young dragon. Even so, the palace lord felt a sense of trepidation as he recalled that terrifying encounter back in the primordial ruins, and a hint of fear flashed past his eyes. Crack, crack, crack. A series of ear-piercing shrieks rang. Against the immense pressure, cracks started appearing on the countless spirit weapons that were initially hovering in midair. Suddenly, they shattered, scattering onto the ground like scrap metal. Only superior and supreme-grade flying swords were able to remain intact. Countless spirit arts dissipated as well. The crowd was in an uproar. How terrifying did his power have to be such that spirit weapons couldn't endure it and shattered on the spot? The azure dragon was lifelike with intact flesh and coiled around Su Zimo's body, spiraling upwards like a variant beast that was guarding him. As Su Zimo surveyed his surroundings, the gaze of the azure dragon above him shifted as well. The man and dragon moved in tandem. Nobody dared to meet with their gazes at all. Su Zimo's eyes were like lightning, and he suddenly took a deep breath, puffing his chest. The azure dragon coiling around him took a deep breath as well, and its body expanded extensively. Raising its chest, a tremendous air current surged and formed a series of cyclone in midair. There was a slight pause. Both of them opened their mouths and let out a deafening roar that could break metal and rocks. Roar! Su Zimo was also letting off a dragon roar. In that instant, the entire world shook and the weather changed. Poof, poof, poof. The Foundation establishment cultivators closest to Su Zimo were unable to defend and their bodies ruptured, turning into blood mists without corpses. He was roared to death. The Foundation establishment cultivators that were slightly further also bled from all 7 orifices. Their gazes dimmed and they collapsed to the ground, dead. Right away, thousands of Foundation establishment cultivators died. Right now, Su Zimo was at extreme Foundation establishment, and he had already attained greater mastery of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness's orifice clearing section. His organs and orifices possessed shocking strength. After releasing the ancient Dragonification manual together with Thunderclap Kill, he instantly created an incomparably lethal impact. There was no way Foundation establishment cultivators could endure it, as they were shocked to death on the spot. After the dragon roar, silence ensued. Corpses were strewn all over the Foundation establishment battlefield as their blood formed rivers. It was like a scene from hell. That single dragon roar crushed the hearts of many Foundation establishment cultivators present. The cultivators that wanted to take advantage of the situation initially fled far away, not daring to turn back. Although there were still more than 10,000 Foundation establishment cultivators from Blood Crow Palace and the other 4 major sects, none of them dared to advance and retreated instinctively. Everyone was trying their best to keep their distance from Su Zimo, and they shivered with fear in their eyes. He killed thousands of Foundation establishment cultivators with a single roar. Even the golden cores and nascent souls present had never witnessed such methods, let alone the Foundation establishment cultivators present. The dragon roar even caused some of the golden cores that were facing Su Zimo directly to clutch their ears in pain. Their bodies swayed, and they nearly fell from midair. With a murderous intent, Su Zimo glared at perfected being Tsang and said coldly, "You guys actually think you can kill me with your standards? Go." Su Zimo pointed forward. The azure dragon coiling around him soared into the air and let out a torrential aura. Baring its fangs and claws, it rammed 3 golden cores that stood at the front instantly, crushing their bodies entirely. Golden cores were dead. Furthermore, they died in the hands of a Foundation establishment cultivator. In the cultivation world, it was still rather common for cultivators to kill enemies that were minor realms above their levels. However, it was almost impossible for them to do that to enemies who were major realms above their levels. But right now, everyone witnessed it with their very eyes. At Extreme Foundation establishment together with the ancient Dragonification manual, Su Zimo now possessed the capabilities to kill golden cores. Another few golden cores attacked and released powerful spirit arts, conjuring pairs of heavenly encompassing palms that wanted to grab the young azure dragon. Roar! The azure dragon's body shone brightly, and it roared. Charging before the few of them, it opened its gigantic mouth and devoured them. It took a couple of chomps and blood streamed down from the side of its mouth. Evil dragon, how dare you act so brazenly? Dozens of golden cores attacked at the same time. Their terrifying spirit energies created a series of chains that restricted the azure dragon. The azure dragon struggled and its body let out shocking strength, crushing the spirit energy chains of the golden cores. When it soared into the skies once more, it charged in front of perfected being Tsang. Bang! Perfected being Tsang was expressionless, and a sky spread out behind him. Filled with resplendent light, it was bedazzling and shot forth countless spirit lights with an alarming aura. It was a golden core phenomenon. Bang! 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 The azure dragon charged at perfected being Tsang golden core phenomenon repeatedly, letting out shuddering echoes. A moment later, the azure dragon dissipated alongside perfected being Tsang golden core phenomenon. The crowd was shocked. A secret skill released by a Foundation establishment cultivator was able to go against a golden core phenomenon. If Su Zimo was at golden core realm, that azure dragon would be even more terrifying and could very likely devour perfected being Tsang in a single mouthful. Chapter 480, Fighting Golden Cores. Chapter 480, Fighting Golden Cores. Perfected being Tsang broke out in cold sweat. He was at late-stage golden core, and yet, even after releasing his golden core phenomenon, he merely matched a single secret skill released by Su Zimo. This was the first time that perfected being Tsang realized that the inexperienced and arrogant scholar of the yesteryears had surpassed his control and expectations. Back then at the sect competition, Su Zimo merely took advantage of the situation to suppress and shame him using his identity as the #1 weapon refinement master of Great Zhou. But now, this scholar was standing toe-to-toe with him in a battle. The difference between the two of them was almost an entire major realm. In the past, perfected being Tsang cultivated to 6 Meridian Foundation establishment before forming his core. He managed to succeed while forming a golden core phenomenon of his own. At that point, he felt that his potential was not inferior to others, and at the very least, he was among one of the top few golden cores within the territory of Great Zhou. But right now, in front of Su Zimo, all his achievements dimmed in comparison. Perfected being Songlang could not help but admit he made a wrong judgment in that small town back then. Time could not be reversed, and there were no medicine for regrets in the world. Right now, the only way out for him was to use everything he had to try and kill Su Zimo. He must not be allowed to continue to grow. That was the only thought remaining in perfected being Songlang's mind. Suddenly, True Fire Sect Sima Ji raised his voice. This lad has just released his secret skill, and it must have taken a toll on his spirit energy. He won't be able to release it a second time. An Azure Frost Sect Golden Core yelled, "That's right. Everyone, don't panic. There's nothing to fear about this lad." Before that person could complete his sentence, his vision turned dark, as though an enormous mountain was shrouding over his head, covering the skies. With a frightening aura, it suddenly collapsed. More than 10 golden cores stood beneath the mountain, and they attacked one after another, wanting to destroy that mountain peak. Clang, clang, clang. One after another, the spirit weapons were repelled. Countless spirit arts clashed against the mountain peak and let out ringing sounds. Yet, they were still unable to slow the speed of its crash. The golden cores were frightfully pale as they tried to flee hurriedly. However, it was a pity that it was too late by then. Boom! A deafening noise echoed. The void shook endlessly. On the spot, more than 10 golden cores were crushed and turned into meat sludge, seeping into the mud beneath and could not be differentiated. That is, a Khanate spirit weapon. He actually has a Khanate spirit weapon. A series of exclamations sounded and everyone's gazes landed on that shining golden seal. That gigantic seal was squarish and golden with a divine dragon etched onto it in a lifelike manner. That was the coiling dragon seal that Su Zimo obtained in the human emperor's palace. Su Zimo beckoned gently, and the coiling dragon seal shrank, returning to his palm. Perfected being Songlang, Sima Ji, and all the other golden cores were red with envy. They glared at the small golden seal in Sima Ji's palm, and their breathings got heavier. After entering nascent soul realm, cultivators would be able to make use of dermic weapons. In other words, for golden cores, Khanate spirit weapons were the best weapons they could make use of. Their combat strength would double at the very least if they had a Khanate spirit weapon, and it would be extremely for them to kill enemies above their levels. However, Khanate spirit weapons were way too rare, and nobody ever sold those in the free market. In the territory of Great Zhou, treasures such as Khanate spirit weapons had not appeared for hundreds of years. Seems like you've benefited plenty in the ancient battlefield. Perfected being Songlang said coldly, "That's good as well. I'll wait to get my hands on your treasures and secret skills after killing you." "The treasures are right in my hands. We'll just have to see if you've got the life to use them." Su Zimo sneered and propped up the coiling dragon seal with his left hand. It shone with 6 spirit patterns in a dazzling manner, as though he was carrying a blazing sun. He swiped his storage bag with his right hand, and a gigantic blood-colored saber appeared in his palm. Its blade quivered and 5 blood patterns shone. A blood beam expanded, followed by the spreading of a nauseating stench of blood. It was the perfect spirit weapon, Blood Quencher. "Songlang, prepare to die." Su Zimo's gaze burned like a torch, and he yelled. Propping the seal with his left hand while wielding his saber with his right, he strode widely towards perfected being Songlang with a murderous aura. In the face of hundreds of golden cores, Su Zimo was advancing instead of retreating. Qian Yi and the others exchanged glances as they charged forward together with invigorated expressions, trying to relieve as much of Su Zimo's burden as possible. "You must have a death wish." A southern mountain sect cultivator wielded a long rod and burst forth with his blood chi, aiming for Su Zimo's head. Splash! Su Zimo channeled his bloodline, and the sound of a tsunami tide echoed. Swoosh! He did not even look at the incoming rod and slashed in reverse, meeting the attack with another attack as he released his incomparable countercurrent stance. The pupils of the southern mountains sect cultivator constricted and his heart skipped a beat in shock. His motions slowed down for a moment due to the effect on his mental state by the saber force. Flashes of blood appeared. That man was cut into two from the middle and his organs and intestines spilled out, giving off a nauseating stench. Sure. A streak of light burst through the void and arrived instantly. Without turning to look, Su Zimo raised his gigantic seal and repelled the incoming flying sword. At the same time, he shuddered and slowed down. Although Qian Yi and the others held back a portion of the golden cores, there were still more than 100 golden cores who attacked Su Zimo at the same time, causing flying swords, spirit arts, and talismans to fill the skies with resplendent lights. Clang, clang, clang. Spinning the gigantic seal with his left hand, Su Zimo released the sea-calming 5 stances right his right and took on the incoming flying swords and spirit arts. Thud, thud, thud. He retreated repeatedly and his organs were immensely shaken, almost shifted out of position even. Su Zimo spat out a huge mouthful of blood. Sima Ji roared in laughter. Su Zimo, you're nothing without that secret skill from earlier. Fufu. Perfected being Tsonglang sneered, even if you can kill early or mid-stage golden cores with your Khanate spirit weapon, you are still a foundation establishment cultivator after all. There's no way you can withstand the might of late-stage or perfected golden cores. You really think you can kill me with those skills of yours? Perfected being Tsonglang continued laughing coldly. Su Zimo was unmoved. Perfected being Tsonglang was not wrong. Even if he was at extreme foundation establishment and had the support of the coiling dragon seal, in terms of strength, he could only match against mid-stage golden cores at best, and he wouldn't be able to deal with those at late stage. In that previous attack, a few perfected golden cores had attacked and Su Zimo was injured on the spot, unable to endure it. However, he was someone who did both immortality and demonic cultivation. Even without taking on his demon form, Su Zimo's physique and bloodline was still enough to crush all other cultivators of the same realm. Even perfected golden cores would not be able to escape death if Su Zimo closed in on them. He was invincible in melee combat. If anyone else had received the injuries he took, it would definitely affect their combat strength. However, Su Zimo's physique was way too strong and his regeneration capabilities were shocking. After consuming the blood-flesh elixir made of dragon flesh in the human emperor's palace, he attained greater mastery of the orifice clearing section and was only a step away from condensing a demon inner core. Within a couple of breaths, Su Zimo's injuries were already mostly recovered. Fu-fu-fu. Smiling, he stood up and his tendons and bones sounded at the same time. Not only did his aura not drop after getting injured, it was even getting stronger and the glint in his eyes intensified. He was like an ancient demon that wanted to devour people. Chapter 481. Frightening. Chapter 481. Frightening. The battle on the Foundation Establishment battlefield had already stopped. The Foundation Establishment cultivators of Blood Crow Palace and the other 4 major sects were scared out of their wits by Su Zimo's methods and did not dare to advance. Clang, clang. Su Zimo beckoned gently, and the 18 flying swords that were streaking around the Foundation Establishment battlefield returned to him, hovering above his head and buzzing loudly. Candlelight sword formation. Condense. Right after, the 18 flying swords gathered together with their tips pointing outwards in unison, forming a gigantic sword-shaped circular disc. 18 rays of sword chi were released like a blazing sun and was extremely dazzling. Kill. Propping the seal with his left hand, Su Zimo held his saber with his right and flapped his spirit wings, charging forward with the candlelight sword formation above him. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Flying swords tore through the air one after another, sharp and dense as raindrops. Spirit arts exploded, covering the skies as they arrived. Su Zimo was calm and seemed composed. With his spirit wings coupled with divine steed fleeting alongside his spirit perception that was gained from cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, His movements were unpredictable. At times, he would be light as a feather, and at others, he would be swift as lightning. No one could read him at all. Shifting nimbly in the air, his tendons and bones constricted and expanded, allowing him to shock everyone by producing motions that were far from ordinary. Like anacondas, snakes, apes, and horses, Su Zimo kept closing in on the distance between him and the golden cores. A late-stage golden core looked at Su Zimo, who was charging at him, and his eyes were widened in disbelief. Was that even a human? He could not imagine how a human could contort their bodies to that extent and dodge such an intense flurry of attacks while rushing over without any injury. He no longer had the chance to think about it anymore. Swoosh! Su Zimo raised his saber instantly. Countercurrent surged forth. After entering Extreme Foundation Establishment, Su Zimo's spirit energy grew much richer, and he could not release saber forces in succession. That golden core was shocked and found himself having difficulty breathing, as though a surging wave was rushing at him. Thunder sounded inside his ears, and the tide arrived almost instantly. Go! This man was a late-stage golden core after all, and composed himself swiftly. Maneuvering his flying sword above his head, he circulated his golden core and spirit energy gushed out. No matter what, the strength of a late-stage golden core was not something a Foundation Establishment cultivator could handle. As long as he could withstand a move or two till the attacks of the others arrived, his enemy would naturally be trapped. Su Zimo smiled faintly with a hint of ridicule in his eyes. To him, the way the golden core changed tactics was full of flaws. Su Zimo's seemingly unstoppable saber suddenly stopped and was only an inch away from the man's flying sword. Swash! Swinging his wrist, the angle of his slash changed. Suddenly, the massive blade of Blood Quencher turned extremely flexible, like ripples on the surface of water. It wrapped around the flying sword and sliced the person's throat gently. Right after that insane toughness, it turned extremely flexible. There was no sluggishness at all, and the process was smooth as water. That person's eyes dimmed and a gash appeared on his throat. The next moment, his head was lopped into the air as blood gushed out in a terrifying manner like a fountain. Melee combat was the most dangerous, and one would be dead with a single misstep. Su Zimo had been through countless battles in his cultivation journey, and he was extremely experienced. While the strength of late-stage and perfected golden cores was strong and could even injure or threaten his life, even the physique of a perfected golden core could not match up to him. That was an advantage he had that could make up for his inferior strength. As long as he closed the distance between them, even perfected golden cores could not escape death. Dayu had once told Su Zimo that demonic cultivators are the best at killing people above their levels. That was the logic in that statement. After killing someone, Su Zimo did not have to pause at all as he used the candlelight sword formation and coiling dragon seal to smash against some incoming flying swords and spirit arts from early and mid-stage golden cores. At the same time, he dodged the attacks of late-stage and perfected golden cores, fleeing away to kill at the other side. A golden core could not react in time and was closed in by Su Zimo, who raised his coiling dragon seal to smash down on the former's head violently. The person's head was smashed and his entire body ripped into pieces with fresh blood flowing everywhere. He died on the spot. Swerving within the crowd, Su Zimo did not bother to fight against late-stage and perfected golden cores forcibly at all. The moment he missed an attack, he would flee instantly without lingering. Even when dozens of golden cores attacked at the same time, they could not keep Su Zimo to a single spot. A moment later, Su Zimo was only filled with a couple more superficial wounds that healed within the blink of an eye. However, more than 10 golden cores on the side of Blood Crow Palace had already died. Everyone was getting more fearful. This man was way too frightening. He already possessed the capability to kill golden cores without even forming a core of his own. Furthermore, he was battling dozens of golden cores, and yet, instead of being disadvantaged, he was slowly controlling the situation. This man looked to be in his 20s. How did he possess such terrifying combat talent? Kill! Seizing an opportunity, Su Zimo took a few strides forward, and arrived before Sima Ji. Lifting his coiling dragon seal, he smashed it down at the latter's head. The coiling dragon seal shone with a bright golden light and let out a thunderous bang as it landed. Boom! The seal landed with a frightening aura. Suddenly, a vicious glint shone in Sima Ji's eyes as he said icily, "I've been waiting for you for a long time." Swoosh! Sima Ji circulated his golden core to its limits, and a phenomenon suddenly appeared behind him. Searing flames burned more than 100 feet tall, letting out a scorching heat. Swiftly, he engulfed Su Zimo with a blazing momentum. It was a golden core phenomenon. The reason why Sima Ji endured till this point was because he wanted to kill Su Zimo thoroughly with his golden core phenomenon. However, Su Zimo did not avoid nor dodge as his bloodline raced. He pushed down his blinding, coiling dragon seal violently like it was a blazing sun. "You must have a death wish." Sima Ji roared, and his golden core phenomenon intensified. Boom! The coiling dragon seal collided against the power of the golden core phenomenon, and a deafening bang was produced as their powers ran rampant. The instant of the collision, the momentum of the flames was actually repressed by the coiling dragon seal. Since he was extremely close to the sea of flames, Su Zimo could only grit his teeth and endure the incoming blaze. He channeled his bloodline and spirit energy to fight against it repeatedly. Both sides exerted their strength. The coiling dragon seal was less than an inch away from Sima Ji's head, but it could not go down further due to the obstruction of the golden core phenomenon. A moment later, a gigantic flame burned over, engulfing Su Zimo's arm completely. The fire sizzled. In an instant, Su Zimo's arm was charred and his flesh ripped apart in a terrifying manner. Sighing internally, Su Zimo withdrew himself and retreated. It was no wonder why golden core phenomenons were the strongest techniques available to golden cores. Even with his Khanate spirit weapon and tsunami bloodline, he could not manage to break through the defenses of the golden core phenomenon. Swiftly, Su Zimo avoided the attacks of many golden cores and escaped. His arm was still burning with fire, and his flesh was already in a bloodied mess. There was no way to purge golden core phenomenons except for extreme means. Haha. Sima Ji laughed loudly. Sima Ji, your arm is already crippled. Not necessarily. Su Zimo harumphed coldly and took a deep breath of air. The spirit sea in his dantian roared and his bloodline surged, cruising through his limbs towards his injured arm. Clack! The flames extinguished and smoke billowed. The cultivators watched with widened eyes. The next moment, something even more frightening happened. The charred black flesh on Su Zimo's arm fell off gradually and fresh, tender meat started growing with a shiny luster. It was an uproar. Chapter 482, Great Qian Empire. Chapter 482, Great Qian Empire. Father, are you really going to just sit by idly and watch? Ji Yaoxue had a blaming look in her eyes, the way she looked at the emperor of Great Zhou. The assertiveness in her eyes was overwhelming, and she already possessed a sort of dominance that was unique to the emperor. First, Su Zimo is my life-saving benefactor. Putting the past aside, even in the ancient battlefield this time round, I would have died in the hands of Jun Hao and the others if it wasn't for him. Second, he's the #1 weapon refinement master of Great Zhou, and would definitely become a great weapon refinement master in the future with limitless accomplishments. Third, and most importantly, he has unlocked 9 spirit meridians and has reached the legendary Extreme Foundation establishment realm. This is the second person in history who has done so apart from the human emperor. Is a paragon as such not worthy of the Great Zhou's attention? Ji Yaoxue's 3 sentences caused the emperor to turn entirely silent. In reality, the third point was still the one that moved the emperor the most. If he could take an Extreme Foundation establishment cultivator under his wing, there was a huge possibility that the Great Zhou dynasty could one day defeat all the other 3 dynasties and reign over the entire north region of Tianhuang Mainland. However, Blood Crow Palace's lord was from the witch race, one of the primordial 9 races. If he dealt with this wrongly, it wouldn't be impossible for the entire Great Zhou dynasty to be destroyed into ruins, let alone rule over the north region of Tianhuang Mainland. More than 10,000 years ago, a massive entity stood on this piece of land, known as the Great Qian Empire. The title of an empire was only given if one could rule over all the dynasties and vassal states of a single region in Tianhuang Mainland. The might of the Great Qian Empire was far greater than the current Great Zhou dynasty, and its territory was vaster. There were even multiple supersects of Tianhuang Mainland within the territory of the Great Qian Empire. Even just within the Buddhist monasteries, 2 of them resided in the Great Qian Empire. The Tao of Buddhism was glorious in the Great Qian Empire. However, it was unfortunate that a catastrophe arrived. Almost overnight, the Great Qian Empire was dismantled, and even its capital was turned into ruins. Because of that, the north region of Tianhuang Mainland fell into chaos, and the flames of war raged everywhere. Devastation spread, and millions of lives were lost, with corpses scattered all over the place. From then on, the Great Qian Empire disappeared with the winds. The place was in chaos, and many vied for supremacy. 4 great vassal states conquered many places and rose swiftly, turning into the Great Zhou, Great Shang, Great Xia, and Great Yu dynasties of the north region of Tianhuang Mainland today. In other words, the 4 dynasties were established on the ruins of the Great Qian Empire. The progenitor of that catastrophe was one of the primordial 9 races. The patriarch of the Great Zhou dynasty has lived for more than 10,000 years and personally witnessed the destruction of a great empire. As such, he viewed the primordial 9 races with a sense of trepidation. As a Dharma characteristic expert and a Tao lord, it wasn't difficult for the patriarch to come forth and take down Blood Crow Palace's lord who was at void reversion. However, if he were to incur the wrath of terrifying existences such as the mighty figures or patriarchs of the witch race, even if there were 10 Great Zhou dynasties, they would all have to be destroyed. The battle was turning more intense, and things were not looking good on the side of Ethereal Peak. It was also difficult for Su Zimo to hold the fort single-handedly. No matter how strong he was, he could not affect the direction of victory for the nascent soul battlefield, and as such, he could not decide the fate for Ethereal Peak. Ji Yaoxue was anxious. When she saw her father remaining silent, as though he was reminiscing about something, she could not help but say, "Father, what are you hesitating for? If you can't make a decision, how about sending a message to the Patriarch of Great Zhou and ask him to make one?" Returning to his senses, the emperor shook his head and replied firmly, "The Patriarch will definitely not agree to this. How do you know if you hadn't tried?" She looked at her father without blinking. The emperor could clearly sense the anxiousness and worry within Ji Yaoxue's heart. However, she was trying her best to control herself, and she wasn't offensive through her words either. He sighed internally. In truth, among the younger generation, the one who resembled him the most and had the most potential to be the emperor was not the many princes, but this daughter of his. However, Ji Yaoxue was a woman and could not inherit his legacy. I'll admit that Su Zimo is an unprecedented paragon who managed to reach the extreme foundation establishment realm, second only to the human emperor. His future accomplishments are unpredictable, but... The emperor changed the topic and said deeply, "Su Zimo is about to die, and he has no future. As such, what accomplishments do we have to speak of? This time round, both Ethereal Peak and Su Zimo are stuck in this calamity, and I can't think of any way in which Ethereal Peak is able to break out of this situation." Ji Yaoxue said in a slight huff, "Nothing is absolute." The emperor replied grimly, If Su Zimo manages to tide through this calamity, then..." He did not continue but merely raised his head and looked at Ji Yaoxue deeply. At that moment, he made a decision in his mind. If Su Zimo could survive this calamity, he would go against all odds and pass the throne down to Ji Yaoxue. On the other side of the forest, "There's no chance left." She shook her head. "Since that person didn't come, it's over for Ethereal Peak." "Gu, what other way is there to save him?" Demonist Ji frowned deeply. "I'm at late-stage nascent soul, and even if I step in, the most I can do is help stabilize the nascent soul battlefield. However, the old beast of ethereal peak up above the clouds can no longer hold on. Gushi replied regrettably, "It's a pity that as the second person in history to reach the extreme foundation establishment realm, Suzimo is about to die without the chance to grow further." Demonist Ji's eyes dimmed. Gushi sighed. The impression left on the cultivation world by that catastrophe 10,000 years ago is way too deep. No cultivator or sect is willing to make an enemy as strong as the witch race just for the sake of ethereal peak. Beneath ethereal peak, blood flowed in rivers and the corpses were stacked like mountains. On the Golden Core battlefield, Suzimo made use of his strong physique and terrifying movement techniques to sustain in the fights continuously, ensuring that they did not lose. However, Ethereal Peak was already completely defeated on the Nascent Soul battlefield. There were more than 100 Nascent Souls, but more than half of them had already died. The remaining Nascent Souls were wounded and could only struggle to defend while being steadily defeated. It was only a matter of time before Ethereal Peak was annihilated. The situation of the old immortal crane above the clouds was even worse. To begin with, the old immortal crane did not have long to live. Unless she progressed in her cultivation realm, she would have only held on for a few dozen more years even without this calamity. Although her true form was a Baifeng, a pure-blooded ferocious bird, she was already old and her combat strength was not even half of when she was at her peak. Of the 5 void reversions that were fighting in the battle, one of them was even from the witch race. By this point of the battle, the old immortal crane was already at the end of her road. Wounded all over, her gaze was dimmed and her feathers shed endlessly. Even the flames on her body were starting to extinguish. Blood Crow Palace's lord waved his bone staff and shot forth an extremely evil blood arrow. The old immortal crane was unable to dodge in time, and an additional bloodied hole the size of an arm appeared on her wings. A sizzling sound was produced from the wound, and it ate at her flesh nearby. Oozing with thick blood, the smell was pungent as the old immortal crane grunted. Immediately after, the attacks of the remaining 4 void reversions landed on the old immortal crane. Poof, poof, 2 more wounds appeared on her body and blood gushed like a stream. The old immortal crane's body almost exploded and one of her legs was snapped. It was a tragic sight as she swayed, about to fall. The old immortal crane had protected Ethereal Peak for thousands of years ever since the founder master passed away. She had truly given it her all and fought to the very last moment without backing off. Everyone from Ethereal Peak was heartbroken when they saw that. Senior Crane. Sect Master Ling Yun exclaimed miserably. The outcome was decided. The moment the old immortal crane falls, all the other Ethereal Peak cultivators would be akin to fish on a chopping board, helpless to being slaughtered. Fu. Blood Crow Palace's lord sneered, "Old beast, I've already told you. Today, I'm going to massacre Ethereal Peak from top down, leaving no one alive." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.